Chapter 123. Ever since the immortal abode opened for business, even the emperor and empress had personally attended. Numerous civil and military officials had also come to congratulate them. In addition, the embroidered uniform guard could appear at any time, reducing the chances of someone causing trouble to a minimum. Even if there were customers who were dissatisfied with not being able to sit at a table, they could only endure due to the reputation of the immortal abode. As time passed, the guests who came here got used to it. There were even some who used this as an excuse to take advantage of the situation. For example, when someone offended an enemy, owed money, or was on the wrong side of the road, the immortal abode would become their place of refuge. Often, as long as they stood in line, no matter how deep their hatred was, they wouldn't dare to make a move here. In this kind of environment, the employees of the immortal abode naturally developed a sense of security. For example, the two supervisors, Mu Lily and Chui Na, used to be the procuress of the 100 Flowers Hall and 9 Arts Workshop. They used to compete in secret. Now that they were both supervisors of the immortal abode, they began to compare themselves in secret. Fortunately, Dong Shui was there to suppress them, so they didn't dare to go too far. On the contrary, they fought over each other, all for the sake of leaving a better impression in Dong Shui's heart. Although the supervisors of the immortal abode had a lot of work to do, and they had to interact with a lot of customers every day, the good thing was that everyone gave them enough face. At the very least, they were in a cheerful mood. As a result, the two supervisors didn't have to act as if they were inferior to others. On the contrary, everyone's status was equal here. There were even some who would say good things in front of them and secretly give them money in order to get a position faster. The immortal abode had long since established a rule that no employee was allowed to accept tips. If they were caught doing so, they would be fired immediately, with no room for negotiation. Because of this, only 2 people had been caught since the opening of the immortal abode. Their faces were full of regret as they begged for mercy. Even if they knelt on the ground, it did not change their ending at all. This was also a great deterrent to the other staff members here. Even the 2 foremen did not dare to take a single silver coin for themselves. In fact, Yang Chendong had always treated everyone who worked for him well. For many people, being provided with food, clothing and money was already a good thing that fell from the sky. There were also some people who were selfish and greedy beyond measure. It was no wonder that they were ruthlessly dealt with. Since they couldn't take tips, nice words poured in like a tide. As the foreman, Mu Lily and Chui Na, felt as if they were bathing in the sun all day long. They were in a good mood. Mu Lily was on duty today. As the foreman, she did her best to arrange everything. Until a waitress ran in front of her and said that there was a customer in the line outside who had an extremely bad attitude. He was so bad that the 2 waitresses in charge of the line were scolded to the point of crying. "There's such a thing? Bring me over to take a look." Mu Lily was astonished to hear that there were people causing trouble outside the immortal abode. In her eyes, what kind of place was this? Even the emperor and empress approved of it, and the officials of the Imperial court would visit from time to time. There was actually someone who dared to say such filthy things here? Did they really eat a bear's heart or a leopard's gall? Mu Lily was a bit confused, and even a bit curious. She wanted to see just who had the guts to cause trouble outside the immortal abode. She walked over to the long line outside the entrance with the female attendant. As soon as she arrived, she saw a waitress walk up to her with a tear-stained face. "Sister Lily, it's that person. His words are so unpleasant to hear. We called a male waiter over to mediate, but he even knocked him to the ground." "What? He dares to hit people?" Mu Lily's expression was full of shock when she heard this. In her eyes, anyone who dared to cause trouble here already didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. What kind of confidence did he have to actually dare to injure people? Or was he really just a brute without any schemes? Wasn't he afraid of being captured by the embroidered uniform guard and imprisoned? With all kinds of confusion and doubt in her mind, she followed the 2 waitresses to the front of the long line, where she saw the brawny man, Tuj, spittle flying all over the place. Tuj had come here to cause trouble. After receiving General Wang's orders, he'd made his preparations and arrived at the immortal abode at noon the next day. His original plan had been to look for trouble after entering the immortal abode. He hadn't expected that he'd be forced to wait in line because he hadn't made an appointment in advance and didn't have a membership card on him. He was the captain of a dignified general's bodyguard. Even in the Walla, he was an existence that could do as he pleased. Very few people dared to not give him face. How could he not be angry when he was given the cold shoulder here? Add to that the fact that he'd come here to cause trouble in the first place. He immediately flew into a rage. He began to spout nonsense in the queue, cursing the immortal abode and saying that they were bullying their customers. He even encouraged others to stop spending money here. Those who could afford to spend money in the immortal abode were either wealthy or respectable. What they wanted was face. Naturally, they wouldn't be swayed by Tuj's words. They only looked at him as if they were watching a show. Everyone had noticed that there were embroidered uniform guard members nearby. However, they didn't immediately stop this man in foreign clothing. It seemed like they were waiting for some kind of order. The embroidered uniform guard really did want to arrest him, but it was Tuj's attire that allowed them to recognize him as someone from the Walla. It was very likely that he was part of the diplomatic mission. When it came to diplomatic matters, the embroidered uniform guard didn't dare to act recklessly. They were truly the epitome of what it meant to be an expert in civil wars, but an amateur in foreign wars. By the time Mu Lily arrived, this was the scene that greeted her. Tuoga was stomping her feet and cursing something, surrounded by a crowd of onlookers. One of the immortal abode's attendants had been beaten up, and blood was flowing from his nose. He glared angrily at Tuoga with the help of a waitress. "What are you doing? Do you know where you are? If you don't explain yourself today, I'll report you to the authorities and have you arrested." Mu Lily looked at the injured waiter from afar. Her eyes flashed with extreme anger. Ever since she'd been promoted to a member of the House of Good Children, she'd been able to speak with many people as equals. She no longer feared the authorities. On the contrary, when she encountered a problem, she would report it to the authorities. Suddenly, an extremely beautiful woman had appeared to criticize him. Even though she wasn't young anymore, she was still in her mid-20s. In Tuj's eyes, she was still extremely attractive. He only felt that the woman in front of him was 100 times prettier than the prostitute he'd found in the red light district last night. His male hormones had officially come online. "Yo, such a beautiful woman wants to work here to earn money? Why don't you follow this captain? I guarantee that you'll live a good life in the future. What do you think?" Tuj's eyes shone brightly. He was like a wolf who'd spotted a sheep. He approached her step by step. She'd interacted with all kinds of men over the years, so she was naturally no stranger to this kind of gaze. Mu Lily sensed a trace of threat, and her aura involuntarily dropped. She took a few steps back, pretending to be unyielding as she said, "What are you trying to do? Let me tell you, I'm a commoner from the Ming dynasty. I'm from a good family. You'd best have some self-respect." "Haha, a good family is good. A good family is clean. I like it." Tuj's brain was currently overtaken by lust. How could he care about such rules? All he wanted to do was to hug Mu Lily in his arms and dote on her. "What are you doing?" Someone in the crowd noticed that something wasn't right. A young man dressed like a scholar took advantage of his tall stature to block Tuj's path. He wanted to stop Tuj's unbearable behavior and reason with him. Tuj felt like he was only a few steps away from touching Mu Lily. However, a figure suddenly appeared in front of him. In a fit of anger, he drew his sword without any explanation and slashed it forward. Holy shit! The scholar's eyesight wasn't bad. When he saw the blade coming, he hurriedly dodged to the side, narrowly avoiding the attack. However, a corner of his robe had been cut off by the blade. It fluttered in the air, as if to tell the crowd that Tuj's anger and killing intent had been truly unleashed. From drawing his sword to slashing it out, the crowd was scared witless. After seeing this person from the Walla's diplomatic mission get serious, no one dared to meddle in this matter. Instead, they all scattered, putting some distance between themselves and the immortal abode's main entrance. In this way, Mu Lily and the two attendants who followed her were completely exposed. Tuj's actions just now didn't seem to be inappropriate in the slightest. In the Walla, one's fists were the absolute law. Apart from the women of the leaders and generals, any other woman could be forcefully snatched away with their fists. Oftentimes, when something like this happened, people would call it a man's action. Not only would he not be punished, he would even be praised. Being captivated by Mu Lily, Tuj's current location was now the Walla's territory. The only thought in his mind was to steal this woman away. He didn't care about anything else at all. Someone come, help! Seeing that there was no distance between her and Tugur, Mu Lily lost her head out of fear and didn't forget to shout loudly. Her gaze also turned towards the embroidered uniform guards wearing flying fish robes not far away. Unfortunately, the embroidered uniform guard acted as if they didn't see what was happening. They'd already arranged for someone to report the incident to their superiors. They wouldn't act rashly until they received orders. Even if Tuj's actions were to kill someone on the street, as a member of the diplomatic mission, he didn't necessarily have to follow the Great Ming Dynasty's laws. Chapter 124. The brocade robe's indifference caused Mu Lily's expression to change again and again. Her originally rosy cheeks were now drained of color, and her complexion paled considerably. An ominous thought appeared in her mind. It seemed that she was definitely going to suffer a loss today. If she were to be taken away by this outsider on the streets, the consequences would be self-evident. If that were to happen, she might as well die. Mu Lily was someone who had seen the world. When she was young, she had once been a courtesan. Who knew how many men had set their sights on her, but not a single one had succeeded. It was clear that she still had some tricks up her sleeve, and even her personality was firm and unyielding. And now, seeing that she couldn't even rely on the soldiers, she prepared to bite off her tongue and commit suicide in a fit of anger. Even if she were to die here, she couldn't let anyone take her away and ruin her innocence. Mu Lily's eyes flashed with a trace of ruthlessness. She wanted to take her own life, but at this moment, Tuagur's thick and solid right hand was already in front of her. Seeing that it was about to touch her snow-white skin, Mu Lily closed her eyes, waiting for the final moment to take her own life. However, what happened next didn't happen. Instead, she heard the muffled sound of a fist, followed by a cry of pain. When she opened her eyes, the first thing she saw was Xianxia pulling back his fist and Tuogi falling to the ground. This move also caused Dao Xiao and his team members, who had been hiding in the shadows, to stop what they were doing. They had been arranged here precisely because Yang Chendong had sensed that something was about to happen. In order to complete his mission, Dao Xiao was prepared to open fire. However, he also knew that if he opened fire, things would become complicated. Just as he was hesitating and making up his mind to open fire, Xianxia was one step ahead of him. Xianxia was a trusted person. He was one of the Dong Shuai's servants, and was in charge of the security of this place. Normally, he would enter the immortal abode and sky beyond heaven more often than the other servants, but his behavior was always extremely ordinary. Even when he was interacting with others, he was extremely polite. Over time, after everyone saw that he did not have the slightest arrogance, they started to get along with him. Occasionally, they would even make lewd jokes, which often made this young man, who had just turned 20, blush. He was just an ordinary servant. If he wasn't Dong Shuai's subordinate, he wouldn't have received any attention. However, such an ordinary person was able to knock Tugger down to the ground with a single punch. This extremely contrasting scene caused Mu Lily's beautiful eyes to widen in shock. At the same time, her face was filled with disbelief. Tugger was knocked down to the ground with a single punch. Furthermore, he was beaten in front of a beauty. This made him feel that he had lost all his face. He snarled and climbed up again. Holding the scimitar in his right hand, he glared at Xianxia. "Brat, you dare to meddle in your grandpa's business? Go to hell." In the next instant, the scimitar flashed with white light as it cut through the air and arrived at Xianxia's chest. This strike was both fast and fierce. Many people with poor eyesight only saw the flash of white light. Because of their nervousness, many people clenched their fists tightly, displaying the nervousness and excitement in their hearts. There were even a few people who reached out with their right hand to press against their hearts, as if their hearts would jump out of their bodies if they didn't do so. Compared to these people, Mu Lily's reaction was even more extreme. She directly let out a cry of alarm. She was truly worried that Xianxia would die because of this. If that happened, even if she bit off her tongue and committed suicide, she still wouldn't be able to make up for her mistake. The scimitar slashed through the air in front of him, followed by a cry of alarm behind him. However, none of this prevented Xianxia from making an accurate judgment. Under his inhuman training, he had long since mastered the ability to maintain a steady state of mind. When the scimitar slashed over, he merely leaned his body slightly to the side and narrowly dodged the sharp edge of the scimitar. Following that, he rushed forward like an arrow. His right hand changed from a fist to a palm as he moved forward, grabbing Tugger's right hand that was holding the scimitar. Following that, before anyone could react, he clenched his fist, twisted his wrist, lifted his arm, and spun his hand around to raise Tugger's right arm high up in the air. Then he exerted some force. Accompanied by a crisp "Kacha" sound, Tugger's right arm was instantly dislocated, causing Tugger to cry out in pain once again. This series of actions was executed extremely beautifully. Regardless of whether it was the timing of the attack or the intensity of the attack, they were all extremely suitable. It gave people the feeling that the outcome of the battle was decided with just a single exchange of blows. Tugger, who looked taller and fiercer, cried out in pain as he hugged his arm. He was like a fat pig that had been slashed but didn't die. After doing all this, Xianxia confidently took 2 steps back and stood back at his original position. It was as if he hadn't made a move at all. Only when he saw Tugger crying out in pain and losing his ability to fight, did Xianxia slowly turn around and come to Mu Lily's side. He extended his right arm to support the trembling Mu Lily and gave her a smile. This smile was like the sun in the cold winter, illuminating Mu Lily's heart. She swore that she had seen many smiles in her life, but none of them were as sincere as the one in front of her eyes. It didn't give her the feeling that her heart was shaken. This smile caused Mu Lily's amorous heart to ripple. Her face turned crimson and her eyes flashed with a blurred color like that of a drunk person. As if he had also felt the changes in Mu Lily's body, Xianxia's face turned red. While feeling his heartbeat suddenly accelerate, he hurriedly turned his head to the side and looked at the 2 female attendants who were also in a daze. He said, "Why aren't you sending Big Sister Mu back to her room to rest?" "Oh yes. After seeing Xianxia's performance just now, the 2 attendants' attitudes towards him underwent a qualitative change. When they heard his words, they didn't dare hesitate in the slightest. They agreed and pulled Mu Lily, whose body was burning hot, away from this place. Just as Mu Lily and the others entered the immortal abode, a group of embroidered uniform guards arrived not too far away. They had received orders to stop Tugger from causing trouble here. However, when they saw that the troublemaker had already been taught a lesson, they casually berated him a few times before walking up to Tugger and leaving. As he watched the embroidered uniform guards leave, Xianxia's intuition told him that this matter wouldn't end just like that. After all, he had dealt with Tugger on the streets. With the embroidered uniform guard's personality, he probably wouldn't let this matter rest so easily. It seemed like he could only immediately report this matter to the young master, and let the Dong Shuai make a decision. Tugger's arm was reattached by an experienced member of the embroidered uniform guard. Only then did the pain lessen significantly. Now that his body was no longer in so much pain, he returned to his previous arrogant self. He bluntly asked why the embroidered uniform guard hadn't taken down the person who had injured him. Just as Tugger was criticizing the embroidered uniform guard for their unfairness, the embroidered uniform guard appeared. Beside him was a eunuch dressed in eunuch robes. Moreover, from the way the others treated him, it was clear that this person's status wasn't low. His name was Qian Sangbao, and he was the supervising eunuch of the Imperial Horse Directorate. He could be considered a well-known figure among the eunuchs. Of the 24 eunuchs of the Ming dynasty, the Ceremony Directorate and the Imperial Horse Directorate were the most important. The Ceremony Directorate was the first of the 12 directorates, and it was often in conflict with the Prime Minister. Although the Imperial Horse Directorate was the last to be established, it was in charge of matters related to the Ministry of War, such as the Imperial Horse Directorate. Even Wang Zhan wasn't able to hide the truth from the eunuchs. There were many people below him who didn't completely listen to his orders. For example, the eunuchs Jining and Gao Rang of the Ceremony Directorate often didn't listen to his orders. There was also this Qian Sangbao. Speaking of Qian Sangbao, he was also deeply trusted by Zhu Qizhen. He had once given an imperial edict to Wang Zhan's nephew, Wang Lin, to the embroidered uniform guard commander Qian Sangbao, and to the eunuchs Qian Sangbao's nephew, Qian Liang, Gao Rang's nephew, Gao Yu, Chao Jixiong's brother, Chao Zhang, and Kai Zhong's nephew, Kai Gu. From this, it could be seen that Qian Sangbao was greatly favored by the emperor. After being favored by the emperor, he became the supervising eunuch of the Imperial Horse Directorate. His position was second only to the head eunuch of the Imperial Horse Directorate, Chen Guan. Because this matter involved an envoy, and because weapons were used, Qian Sangbao hurried over to deal with it. He just happened to meet the embroidered uniform guard at the door. Knowing that the embroidered uniform guard was a special envoy from the Walla, Qian Sangbao very courteously followed him to see Tugger. They just happened to hear him shouting, "Eunuch Qian, you've already heard the matter. My Walla envoy was beaten up by a commoner of the Ming dynasty. Shouldn't you give us an explanation? The embroidered uniform guard commander's face was filled with anger. This was the same as slapping his face. If he couldn't get an explanation, how could he still have the face to lead the envoy? This. Qian Sengbao originally wanted to say that he received news that Tugger attacked first, and because of this, he almost injured a commoner of the Ming dynasty. However, when he thought about how no lives were lost, and the one who was injured was Tugger, he felt that he had already earned some face. Since that was the case, it wasn't a big deal to hand over the person who beat him up and end this fight. After all, the Ming dynasty and the Walla still valued peace. Tang Qianhu, who did it? Qian Sengbao saw the embroidered uniform guard's Tang Tong and waved his hand to call him over. Tang Tong was in charge of monitoring the envoy. Previously, when the embroidered uniform guard commander went to Xianxia village, he was the one who showed up. This time, when Tugger was beaten up, he was still the one who came forward to investigate the matter. Qian Sengbao's status was higher than Tang Tong's. Since the other party asked, Tang Tong could not answer. After thinking for a moment he replied, I heard that it was done by one of Yang Shima's servants. Yang Shima? Yang Chendong? That Dong Shuai? Qian Sengbao chuckled, and an imperceptible coldness flashed through his eyes. Yang Chendong's name could be said to be well known in the capital, and he was even in the limelight. Not only was he very talented, he was also very rich. He had also received Zhu Qizhen's recognition, and had a good relationship with Wang Zhen, so everything he did seemed to go smoothly. Chapter 125. But at the same time, because he was too close to Wang Zhen, he attracted the displeasure of some other eunuchs. Qian Sengbao was one of them. Originally, because the emperor valued him, especially Princess Chengda's birthday, it was completely arranged by Yang Chendong. It was the first time in the history of the Ming dynasty that a foreign minister was arranged for the princess' birthday. Some people who had ideas didn't dare to act rashly. In addition, he had a good relationship with Wang Zhen, so Qian Sengbao couldn't find a suitable reason to find trouble with Yang Chendong. Now, this person's servant was actually involved in this matter. As a result, it was perfectly justifiable to arrest this servant. At that time, if this Yang Chendong was sensible, he would take out a large sum of money and give it to Qian Sengbao. If not, Qian Sengbao would destroy his prestige. No matter what, Walla's envoy was injured this time. We have to give him an explanation. Should Qian Hu Tang bring people to call the servant? Of course, we're just investigating the truth of the matter. We're not saying that he's guilty. Qian Sengbao had a sinister smile on his face, as if everything was for the public good. Asking Tang Tong to arrest Yang Chendong's servant was to destroy the relationship between Dong Shuai and Wang Zhen. Who didn't know that Tang Tong was eunuch Wang Zhen's subordinate? Qian Sengbao was wholeheartedly for the public, and he came out in front of Walla's envoy. He didn't have to worry that Tang Tong wouldn't do it. Otherwise, it would be openly disobeying the orders of his superior. Even if a lawsuit was brought to the emperor, Wang Zhen wouldn't be able to plead for his servant. Tang Tong wasn't stupid at all. On the contrary, he was very shrewd. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to become a Qianhu. How could he not see Qian Sengbao's intention? However, the situation was like this. He had no other choice but to do it. He thought that if he explained properly when he went to catch the servant, he would not destroy the relationship between eunuch Wang and Dong Shuai. After all, they were both beneficial if they cooperated, and harmful if they separated. Presumably, Dong Shuai should be very clear about this point. He would definitely not destroy the harmony between everyone because of a servant. All right, I'll go capture them right away. After receiving the order, Tang Tong led her subordinates towards the immortal abode. The immortal abode wasn't affected by what was happening outside. What happened outside the gate was just one of the topics that everyone talked about. Compared to most people's indifference, Mu Lily was extremely nervous. After a while, her heart slowly calmed down. Then, she began to worry about Yang Si. Wounding Tile's messenger in the middle of the street was a serious crime. She didn't know how a mere servant like him could be so skilled. This time, he had caused such a big mess. He wondered if anything would happen to him. Although Dong Shuai was very capable, this was only a servant's accident. How much effort would he put in? If Yang Si was punished because of her, or even arrested by the brocade guard, what would she do? Just when Mu Lily was blaming herself, Madame Snow came to her room to rest. When she smiled, 2 shallow dimples appeared on her cheeks. With Dong Shuai's nourishment, she looked even more indescribably beautiful. Sister Mu, why did you call me here in such a hurry? What's the matter? Madame Shui was arranging the performances in the front hall. Suddenly, a waiter told her that Mu Lily was looking for her. She was very anxious. She put off all her work and came here because of the sisterly love between sisters. Seeing Xiao Yuxue, Mu Lily acted as if she had seen her savior. She stepped forward and grabbed Xiao Yuxue's wrist. Yuxue, you must help me this time. What's going on? Madame Shui knew that Mu Lily was a strong-willed person. Although she had panicked a lot in the past, she had never been like this. She seemed to be out of her wits. Madame Shui was also shocked by her change. Yuxue, you know that there was a fight outside the gate just now, right? Here's the thing. After Mu Lily told her the details, Xiao Yuxue's face changed. She became more nervous and worried. So this time, in order to save you, Xianxia injured the messenger of Walla, which got him into big trouble. Unless Dong Shuai is willing to help, I'm afraid that he is just a servant. He is destined to make sacrifices and even pay a price for this. Mu Lily was so anxious that she burst into tears. Wait, Sister Mu. Don't worry. Let me think about it. Xiao Yuxue had become the top courtesan of 100 Flowers Hall not only because of her sweet voice, but also because of her wisdom. Otherwise, she would have been able to become Dong Shuai's woman, while Madame Xiang had not been able to become Dong Shuai's woman. Xiao Yuxue forced herself to calm down. She thought about the seriousness of the matter first. If Xianxia was just a servant of Dong Shuai, it was indeed troublesome for him to do such a thing. If it were other masters, they would probably push him out and make him a sacrifice in order to calm down the situation. But Dong Shuai was not an ordinary person. He would not treat his servant like this. Xiao Yuxue comforted herself. Mu Lily seemed to be a little impatient. Yuxue, this time, no matter what, you have to help me, begged Dong Shuai. As long as Xianxia is fine, I'm willing to do anything to atone for his crime. Mu Lily's eagerness made Xiao Yuxue feel that something was wrong. After thinking for a while, she widened her eyes and asked, Sister Mu, Xianxia just saved you once. You don't have to be so excited. But why do you seem to be ready to risk everything? Is it because... Yes, I just fell in love with him. The moment he saved me, his smile completely opened my heart. To tell you the truth, I fell in love with him at that time. Mu Lily was really daring. Faced with Madame Shui's test, she admitted it directly. This was a little beyond Xiao Yuxue's expectation. She had thought that Mu Lily just wanted to repay her kindness, but now it seemed that it was not so simple. It was very likely that if something happened to Xianxia, then this elder sister would not live alone. She knew her sister well. She knew that she was capable of doing such a thing. Thinking that Xianxia's life was closely related to Mu Lily's, Xiao Yuxue did not dare to neglect her. Okay, I'll go back to the Yang village and plead with Dong Shuai. Thank you, thank you. Mu Lily's face was full of gratitude. She knew that Madame Shui was willing to plead with Dong Shuai because of her. This was also why she was willing to confess her feelings for Xianxia without any reservations. Madame Shui left as soon as she said she would. She got into her carriage and left the immortal abode. About 15 minutes after she left, Tang Tong arrived, accompanied by 50 members of the embroidered uniform guard. Wang Zhan held important shares in the immortal abode, so Tang Tong didn't dare act recklessly. He didn't even put on his flying suit. Instead, he changed into casual clothes and went to find Mu Lily, the head of the immortal abode. Mu Lily was shocked by Tang Tong's sudden arrival. She had a premonition that something was going to happen, but in order to give Madame Shui enough time to plead, she pretended not to know anything. When she heard that Tang Tong was looking for Xianxia, she put on a serious face and said that she had seen him just now, and that she would send someone to look for him. Tang Tong didn't suspect anything and agreed with a smile. However, they waited for an hour until he was getting impatient. Mu Lily also knew that she couldn't hide it any longer. Only then did she say that Xianxia had most likely returned to the Yang clan manor. Let's go to the Yang clan manor. Tang Tong's face was full of displeasure. They'd been here for too long. Who knew if they'd be able to find Xianxia? He didn't want to cause trouble if he missed his job. Mu Lily's heart clenched as she watched Tang Tong and the others leave. She'd originally wanted to go back and take a look, but she was on duty today. If she left, it would be a dereliction of duty. It would only anger Dong Shuai, and the gains wouldn't make up for the losses. Since she couldn't go back with them, all she could do was pray that nothing happened to Xianxia. Xiao Yushue's pleas would be effective. The situation in the Yang clan manor was completely different from what Mu Lily had imagined. Yang Chendong had no intention of giving up on Xianxia. His personality didn't allow him to do so. Xianxia had rushed back as soon as he'd finished his preparations. As soon as he entered the manor, he saw Yang Chendong and gave him a detailed account of what had happened. Then, he half-knelt on the ground. His actions today were a little rash, but seeing that the embroidered uniform guards were only watching the show without making a move, he could not just stand by and watch Mu Lily be taken away. If that was the case, he was afraid that it would make the young master unhappy. Yang Chendong was writing something in his study. It was a new song and a new book. The area covered by Yang Bao was no longer limited to the capital. He had already reached Tianjin, and the next step was to prepare to enter the auxiliary capital, Nanjing. Although this might take some time, the necessary preparations had to be made. As he wrote, he listened to Xi's report. From the beginning to the end, there was not the slightest change. Even when he heard that Tuogir's arm had been dislocated, he still continued to write with vigor. Xiao Yin, who was grinding ink at the side, trembled. She was clearly afraid when she heard this. "It's fine." Yang Chendong had no choice but to put down his brush. He gently placed his hand on the back of Xiao Yin's hand and gave her a comforting smile. Then, he slowly turned his gaze to Xianxia, who was kneeling on the ground. "You did the right thing. Get up." "Thank you, young master." The words "did the right thing" made Xianxia feel as if he had been pardoned. He stood up, and Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei, who were standing to the side, hurriedly reached out to help him up. In the past few days, they had gotten along very well, as if they were blood brothers. Of course, they didn't want to see their brother make any mistakes. Chapter 126. When he saw Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei's nervous expressions, Yang Chendong chuckled. "With our current strength, we can still cause trouble, but we shouldn't be afraid of it. If anyone provokes us, when it comes to matters of principle, we absolutely cannot back down. If we can't back down, we'll F*CK them up." The vulgar F*CK them up caused Tiger's Mane and the others to tremble, their eyes shining. This was the temperament and style of a true hero. This matter was originally caused by the Walla emissaries being overbearing. They wanted to see me, but couldn't, so they had no choice but to target the immortal abode. Yang Chendong's mind was very clear, and he quickly thought through the entire situation. Since this matter has come, there's no way to avoid it. If that's the case, then we'll just have to face it as we should. Yang Chendong spoke with a face full of confidence. This confidence came from his large warehouse. With it, he didn't believe that there was anyone in this world who could harm him. If it weren't for the sake of the Great Ming's people, and the fact that he didn't want them to experience the flames of war, he would have already used Crimson City as the center and slaughtered his way into the Great Ming's interior. If he didn't want the common people to suffer, then he had to play a big game of chess. In the process of laying out his plans, he had to endure patiently. However, enduring patiently didn't mean that he had no principles to back down. For example, Xi's actions were within his rights. If he couldn't even protect his people this time, then his titles as Young Master and Dong Shuai would lose all meaning. No matter how many treasures there were in the warehouse, they would only be decorations. Xianxia had to be protected. As for how many troublesome matters would arise in the process, he would just have to deal with them as they came. He had already made up his mind. When he was about to announce it, Madame Snow stumbled into the study. Her face was covered in sweat, and her expression was extremely nervous. When she entered the study and saw that Xianxia was still standing there, she breathed a sigh of relief. "Sister Shui, what happened to you?" Xiao Yin was shocked to see Madame Snow in such a state. She hurriedly took out a fragrant handkerchief and walked over. Yang Chendong's eyes also fell on Madame Snow. There was curiosity and doubt in his eyes. At the same time, there was a faint murderous intent flowing in his eyes. Yang Qindong thought that something big must have happened to make Madame Snow so nervous. Could it be that someone had attacked the immortal abode? Someone was challenging his bottom line, forcing him to erupt with an appropriate amount of strength. I'm fine. Noticing the confusion in their eyes, Madame Shui thought that she might have acted too hastily and caused misunderstandings. She hurriedly explained, I'm here for Xianxia. Young master, can I beg you not to hurt Xianxia? He did it to save Sister Mu. Big Sister Mu said that as long as young master spares Xianxia, she'll do anything you ask of her. She's willing to be a slave for the rest of her life, working for the immortal abode. Wait a moment. Yang Qindong interrupted Madame Snow. Why is Mu Lily so worried about Xianxia? You came here in such a hurry. You must have been entrusted with this by Big Sister Mu, right? His question hit the nail on the head. Madame Snow's face flushed red. She knew that nothing could be hidden from Dong Shui. She nodded and said, Yes, Big Sister Mu went to find Madame Snow. She said that Xianxia did everything to save her. She couldn't be ungrateful, so she asked me to intercede on his behalf. I'm afraid that's not all. Yang Qindong chuckled. He'd heard something different in Madame Snow's words. Xianxia was just a servant. In any other noble family, his existence was completely dispensable. Even if he'd made some kind of contribution, he wouldn't have earned such gratitude from his master. But judging from Mu Lily's expression, she was obviously very anxious. Otherwise, Madame Snow wouldn't have come back in such a hurry. There must be something else. Since Yang Qindong had pointed it out, Madame Snow knew that there were some things that she couldn't hide. Otherwise, if Dong Shui found out that she had something on her mind, it would be a big deal. After deciding to say it, she turned her head, looked at Xianxia and said, Elder Sister Mu admires you, you can be considered lucky. What? Xianxia hadn't figured out what had happened. But when Madame Snow suddenly pointed at him, he was immediately stunned. At first, he didn't know what to do. Then his face turned red. Obviously, he was a little overwhelmed and even a little emotional. Ha 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 ha. Yang Qindong, on the other hand, could not help laughing out loud when he finally heard Mu Lily's attitude from Madame Snow. Good luck. Xianxia, you're in luck. Ha ha ha. Young master. Xianxia was very embarrassed by Yang Qindong's laughter. He could only lower his head and express his feelings silently. Well, there's nothing to be embarrassed about. Tell me, do you like Mu Lily? Of course, she's a few years older than you. If you don't like her, it's fine. Just make her give up on this idea. Although Yang Qindong was very happy that these trusted subordinates of his settled down early, he was also relieved. However, he wouldn't force her to do anything. Love required mutual love, and the two of them had to spend their days together. It wasn't something that could be done by force. Well, Xianxia reached out and scratched his head. He was a little embarrassed to face some questions. Don't beat around the bush. The young master asked you. Just tell him the truth. What are you afraid of? Tiger's Mane urged anxiously when he saw Xianxia's ambiguous attitude. His right hand was naturally raised. From the looks of it, if Xianxia couldn't give an answer, this slap would fall at any time. Seeing that everyone was looking at him and waiting for an answer, Xianxia knew that it was not the time to be pretentious. He immediately raised his head and looked at Yang Qindong. He knelt on the ground again. Young master, I also like Steward Mu. If she's willing, please accept her, young master. When Xianxia finally expressed his attitude, Tiger's Mane's big hand finally fell and hit him on the back of the neck. Tiger's Mane then laughed and said, You're the one who dares to admit what you did. Ha! Hearing Tiger's Mane's words, several people in the study laughed. Yang Qindong's face was also filled with joy. Very good. Since both of you have feelings for each other, let's settle this matter first. Once this matter is over, we'll work for them. But before that, Xianxia, you need to hide for a while. Tell everyone that he has returned to his hometown in Jianghu Prefecture. Do you understand? This was Yang Qindong's preparation to protect Xianxia. After hearing this, everyone immediately agreed in unison. At this moment, footsteps came from outside the study. Jianghu walked into the study and half knelt. Young master, Jianghu Tang Tong of the Embroidered Uniform Guard is here. He said he has something to ask you. He came so quickly. Yang Chendong's face immediately became serious. Take him to the side hall and wait. Young master, I'll go over now. Yes. Yang Wu answered and left. Yang Chendong looked at Tiger's Mane and said, take Yang Si to the backyard and find a place to hide. Tiger's Mane, follow young master to the side hall and meet Tang Tong. After saying this, Yang Chendong stood up. Madam Snow looked at him anxiously and seemed to want to say something, but he spoke first. Don't think too much. Yang Si will be fine. Yang Chendong went straight to the side hall. Madam Snow was still a little uneasy. Xiao Yin, who stayed behind, held her hand and comforted her. Sister Snow, don't worry. With young master here, Yang Si will never be handed over. These words weren't words of comfort, but Xiao Yin was well aware of the close relationship between the young master and the retainers. It's just that some things can't be explained to others. You can only rely on yourself to observe and see with your heart to understand a thing or two. Tang Tong had just been led into the side hall by Yang Wu when Yang Chendong and Tiger's Mane appeared in the side hall. Seeing Yang Chendong in green, Tang Tong did not dare to be arrogant. She quickly sat up and saluted with her hands folded. Greetings, Yang Chendong. Haha, Chili Arch Tang, you're welcome. Yang Chendong pointed to the chair with a smile on his face. Thank you, Yang Chendong. Tang Tong said politely and then sat down again. A maid brought tea and put it in front of Tang Tong and Yang Chendong. Then she left. As a guest, Tang Tong gently picked up the teacup and took a sip. Then she nodded with a look of enjoyment. Dong Shuai's tea is really good. Chili Arch Tang, you're welcome. If you like it, you can take some back when you leave. Yang Chendong still had a smile on his face. He spoke unhurriedly and did not seem to have any intention of asking why Tang Tong was here. In Tang Tong's eyes, Yang Chendong's calmness made him unhappy. He had brought dozens of brocade guards with him. If it were other ministers, they would have panicked and lost their composure. There were usually only two possibilities for Yang Chendong to show such indifference. First, he was pretending to be stupid. Second, he was really stupid. The great Dong Shuai could not have a problem with his brain. Then, it could only be the first answer. It seemed that it would be very difficult to find Yang Si, who had hit people. However, he had to do his job. Even if this trip was annoying, he could only get straight to the point. Yang Chendong, the situation is like this. This Chili Arch is here for a servant of yours named Yang Si. He injured people outside the immortal abode earlier. They've already reported it to the authorities and are going to confront him. However, I don't know if it would be convenient for you to hand him over? Tang Tong spoke in a probing tone. If one looked closely, they would even see a trace of a smile on her face. It was as if she wanted to tell Yang Chendong that she was not here for him. She was here because the implications of this matter were too great. Given her position, she had no choice. Chapter 127. Yang Chendong listened attentively, without the slightest hint of annoyance. It was as if he had just learned of this matter. When Tang Tong finished speaking and closed his mouth, he feigned surprise and said, "Something like this actually happened? How audacious!" Tang Tong didn't know whether he was referring to Yang Si, who had beaten someone up, or to Tang Gu, who had wanted to commit murder outside the immortal abode. As soon as he said this, Tang Tong's expression became somewhat unsightly. However, what made him even more embarrassed was that Yang Chendong seemed to have only expressed his attitude. After saying this, he didn't say anything else. Unable to bear it any longer, Lord Tang raised his head to look, only to see Yang Chendong leisurely sipping on his tea. This attitude really infuriated Tang Tong quite a bit. "What's this? Your servant was injured by someone else, and as the master, you're just going to let it go with a single comment of audacity?" Tang Tong's expression darkened. "Yang Shima, you see, the matter has already happened. Shouldn't we arrest him?" "Of course. A life for a life, and a debt must be repaid. Although he didn't kill anyone, beating someone up is still wrong. If Lord Tang wants to arrest him, then go ahead. There's no need to give this official face." Seeing that Tang Tong was starting to get impatient, Yang Chendong spoke with a righteous expression. He didn't seem like he was going to show any favoritism. "Good. It's rare for Lord Tang to be so righteous. Since that's the case, can't you hand him over?" Tang Tong knew that what he was doing would make Yang Chendong unhappy. However, he had to do his job, so he had to do it properly. Besides, he was only arresting a servant, not making things difficult for Yang Chendong. There shouldn't be any problems, right? Hand him over? In that instant, it was Yang Chendong's turn to be shocked and confused. Since Yang Si injured someone, Lord Tang should just go ahead and arrest him. Why are you still asking this official for him? It's really puzzling. Yang Chendong shook his head as he spoke. He was just short of saying that Tang Tong's request was too abrupt, too inappropriate, too inappropriate. Upon seeing Yang Chendong's reaction, Tang Tong finally understood what the Dong Shuai was thinking. To put it nicely, he was shirking responsibility. To put it bluntly, he was pretending to be stupid and acting shamelessly. If he had already caught Yang Si, why would he need to make this trip to the Yang family manor? Although Yang Chendong had some talent, some ability to make money, and even had a cooperative relationship with his superior, eunuch Wang Zhan, these were not enough for him to greet him over such a small matter. Angry at Yang Chendong's act of pretending to be stupid, Tang Tong's expression became much more severe. Yang Shima, to tell you the truth, Yang Si escaped and I don't know where he went. This time, I came to the Yang family manor to ask you to hand him over. Seeing that Tang Tong had finally revealed his tale, Yang Chendong chuckled and shook his head as if he had heard a funny joke. Lord Tang, I said that Yang Si beat someone up. It's right for you to arrest him. There's no need to say anything to this official. As for what you said about asking me to hand him over, it's really inconceivable. What? Could it be that Yang Shima didn't hide him? I've already asked the soldiers guarding the city. They saw Yang Si coming out of the city gate and heading towards the Yang family manor. Tang Tong laid out the situation she knew on the table, as if she already had something on him. He had no choice but to admit it. What a joke. If that's the case, then Lord Tong is certain that I'm harboring criminals. Very well. Then please show me the evidence. If this official is guilty, then I'm willing to accept the punishment. Yang Chendong spread out his hands and frowned as he spoke with great displeasure. I don't have direct evidence, but this lord is certain that Yang Si must be in the Yang family manor. If you don't hand him over, then forgive this lord for being unreasonable and searching the manor. Tang Tong's eyes widened, and even the veins on his arms bulged to express his dissatisfaction. Tang Tong's threat rang out in the side hall. When Tiger's Mane heard it, his body unconsciously tensed up. He was certain that as long as the young master gave the order, he would immediately take action to subdue Tang Tong. What bullshit, Lord of the Embroidered Uniform Guard. Perhaps he had some martial arts skills, but he was nothing in the eyes of the #1 person in the Yang family's military. Tang Tong was still staring at Yang Chendong and didn't notice anything wrong with Tiger's Mane. On the other hand, Yang Chendong sensed a slight change and coughed lightly to remind Tiger's Mane not to act rashly. Then, he turned to look at Tang Tong and said, Lord Tang, are you that confident? How can you be so sure that anyone who comes to my Yang village will definitely enter my village? Have you ever thought that if you forcefully searched the manor and couldn't find anyone, this official would report you? Humph. When he saw that Yang Chendong wanted to threaten him, Tang Tong raised his head and put on an insufferably arrogant and fearless expression. Yang Chendong saw all of this and laughed instead of getting angry. Oh, right, I forgot that Lord Tang is a member of the Embroidered Uniform Guard. You aren't afraid of being impeached by us officials. However, I don't know if silver is enough. 10,000 taels, 100,000 taels, or even 1,000,000 taels. I believe that as long as this official is able to fork out the silver, there should be many people in the palace who are willing to speak up for this official. When the time comes, one side is a huge sum of money, while the other is a mere lord of the Embroidered Uniform Guard. What do you think those people will choose? Of course, it's hard to say if you are worth that much money. However, this official knows that in order to maintain their dignity, it is worth it to fork out some silver. Not to mention, this official has a lot of silver, so much so that I can't spend it all. I don't think I need anyone to remind me of this, right? As soon as he finished speaking, Tang Tong's expression changed again. When Tang Tong first heard that he was going to be impeached, he didn't care. After all, he was a member of the Embroidered Uniform Guard and this time, he was in the right. This was also the reason why the Embroidered Uniform Guard and the East Faction Guards were so arrogant. However, When he continued to listen and heard that Yang Chendong wanted to use silver to pave the way and bribe the people in the palace, it was as if he had hit the weak spot of a snake. Finally, his expression began to change drastically. It wasn't the people in the imperial court, but the people in the palace. This meant that Yang Chendong didn't want to give the silver to the officials, but to the eunuchs in the palace. As a subordinate of the eunuchs, Tang Tong was very clear about the human nature of eunuchs. In the eyes of these people who couldn't be considered complete, loyalty and friendship were all nonsense. Only silver and authority were tangible things that could be seen and touched. The entire embroidered uniform guard only had 14,000 man posts and only 14,000 man officers. Who knew how many people were staring at each of the positions? If he didn't make any mistakes, there would still be people looking for mistakes. If Yang Chendong was really willing to pay a large sum of money, his position as the 1,000-man officer would really be in danger. He even thought that in the face of such a large sum of money, even his immediate superior, eunuch Wang Zhan, might abandon him. In the palace, there was no lack of capable people. Under the influence of what they saw and heard every day, the eunuchs had long gotten used to the internal strife. They had long understood what it meant to cheat each other and what it meant to hit someone when they were down. Once something happened to him, he didn't know how many people would secretly plot against him. Would Yang Chendong be willing to pay a large sum of money? Others didn't know, but the things that this person did couldn't be judged by common sense. Perhaps for the so-called dignity that wasn't worth much, he would really do it. If he was really willing to pay 1,000,000 taels of silver, he dared to guarantee that he would have a good time raiding the village. However, it wouldn't be long before countless reasons would appear to make him a prisoner. After a careful analysis, Tang Tong couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. When he looked at Yang Chendong, although the other party's face had already returned to its previous calm state and looked as harmless as before, for some reason, in his eyes, Yang Chendong seemed to have become as terrifying as a ferocious tiger that could eat people. Noticing that Tang Tong's expression was constantly changing, Yang Chendong didn't say anything else, nor did he have the intention to rush him. He knew that some things needed to be thought through by himself. Of course, if the other party wasn't afraid of his threat, then there was only one last step left, which was to let the tiger's man and the others strike first. Although the consequences of this would be extremely severe, it was still better than raiding the village. After the Yang family manor passed through his hands, there were already too many secrets. Many of the good things stored were also used up and he didn't have time to put them away. This matter also reminded Yang Chendong that in the future, it was better not to put too many things that could not be seen by others in the manor. He had to be vigilant at all times. He did not want to wait until something big happened. If he reacted, then it might be too late. Yang Chendong didn't say anything, but Tang Tong's heart was in turmoil. In the end, his rationality prevailed over his impulse. If he searched the village, regardless of whether he found Xianxia or not, he was afraid that this enmity would be formed. He could foresee that the outcome that awaited him wouldn't be too good. Since that was the case, he might as well do a favor at little cost. Sigh. After a long sigh, Tang Tong was also an expert at acting. He frowned and said as if he had been wronged, "Xianxia ma, of course this Qian who doesn't want to make things difficult for you." However, the order was given by the Imperial Horse Supervisor Eunuch Qian Seng. "I'm only following orders. If I can't find him, I really don't know how to explain it." "That's simple." Yang Chendong's face was full of confidence. He gave Tang Tong a friendly smile and said, "Qianhu Tang, you can say that Xianxia knew that he had hurt someone and was afraid of being sued, so he has already left the capital. It's very likely that he went to the Yang family manor in Jianghu Prefecture. As long as the checkpoints along the way are strict, it's very likely that he will be intercepted and arrested halfway." Chapter 128. This was the reason Yang Chendong came up with. He didn't say that he couldn't catch Xianxia. This was to give Qian Sengbao hope and allow Tang Tong to report back. As for whether he could catch Xianxia or not, it wouldn't be long before Walla's messenger couldn't even protect himself. When that happened, who would pay attention to Xianxia? Even if someone saw Xianxia, his identity would be changed. He would no longer be a madman but a hero who killed the enemy. Tang Tong was startled when he heard the reason. He then asked suspiciously, "Did Xianxia really escape? Can we really catch him? Does Yang Xianma know the consequences if we catch him?" "I know. Don't worry, Lord Tang. By the way, all of you must be tired from the trip. I've already prepared 5,000 taels of silver outside. When Lord Tang leaves, please distribute it to all of you. Since Tang Tong asked such a question, it meant that he agreed with the reason. He was just worried. Since the matter had been settled, Yang Chendong naturally had to show sufficient friendliness. 5,000 taels of silver was just enough to fill a large wooden chest. Using this to settle this matter was worth it no matter how one looked at it. Whether it was at the seaside of Crimson City, Immortal Abode, or sky beyond heaven, Yang Chendong could be described as earning a fortune every day. Since he didn't lack money, any problem that could be solved with silver taels wouldn't be a problem anymore. With a reason to report back in silver taels, Tang Tong's expression instantly turned for the better. He cupped his fists and smiled. Yang Xianma is too courteous. Since Xianxia isn't in the manor and has escaped to Jianghu residence, I will report back now. As for Lord Tang's decision, it will be up to the higher-ups. Hee, of course. Yang Chendong chuckled. He knew that Tang Tong wouldn't make things difficult for him on this matter. After this matter, the friendship between the two deepened. Of course, the smile on Tang Tong's face became even brighter. Reporting. Just as Yang Chendong and Tang Tong were laughing and looking at each other, looking like they were getting along very well, Jianghu suddenly ran in from outside the door. Because he was running too fast, he almost tripped over the door sill. What's going on? Don't you see that young master is talking with someone? Seeing Yang Wu lose his composure, Tiger's Mane stepped forward and reprimanded him softly. What happened? Yang Chendong noticed Tiger's Mane's loss of composure and was somewhat puzzled. In his impression, these Yang family retainers had long been trained to remain calm even if Mount Tai were to collapse in front of them. He really didn't know what had happened to make them behave like this. Young master, third young master is here. He has already entered the manor. Yang Wu didn't have time to explain anything to Tiger's Mane. When he saw Yang Chendong's question, he immediately answered. Third princess? Princess Changda? Why is she here? Yang Chendong was slightly taken aback when he heard this. Princesses, especially after reaching adulthood, weren't allowed to leave the palace as they pleased? Then why did she come to his manor without even greeting him? What was going on? Yang Chendong was flabbergasted. Tang Tong, who had been chatting happily with him, also had a similarly confused look on his face. He also didn't understand why the princess would leave the palace, and why she would come to the Yang manor. While the two of them were puzzled, or rather, unable to react for a moment, the sound of noisy footsteps came from outside the side hall. Then they heard a eunuch shout in a high-pitched voice. The princess has arrived. As the voice fell, a group of junior eunuchs entered the hall. Then, under the escort of a dozen palace maids, Princess Changda, dressed in a pink gown, walked in and stood in front of Yang Chendong. Speaking of which, this was the second time the two of them had met. Greetings, Princess Chen Sui. Tang Tong reacted quickly. Once he saw Princess Changda, he knelt on the ground. Yang Chendong, who was at the side, was only slightly taken aback before he had no choice but to kneel on the ground as well. Rise! Fortunately, before Yang Chendong's knees touched the ground, Princess Changda had already spoken. Thank you, Chen Sui. Yang Chendong knew when to stop, and hurriedly got up. His movements were even faster than Tang Tong's. Fortunately, the princess's attention wasn't on him. Instead, she stared at Tang Tong and said, I recognize you. You're Tang Tong, right? Hearing that the princess actually recognized him, Tang Tong's face was naturally filled with joy. Princess has a good memory. This lowly one is Tang Tong, and now, Tang Tong seemed to want to use this opportunity to show off. He had heard that Princess Xianxia and the Emperor were siblings from the same mother, and had a very good relationship. With his status, fawning on the Emperor was a little far-fetched, but fawning on the princess was a shortcut. But before he could finish, Princess Xianxia had already spoken. Why did you bring so many people to the Yang family manor? Did Yang Jima commit any crime? This he didn't. Tang Tong didn't know what the princess meant, but from her tone, he could tell that she was a little angry, so he wanted to explain himself. However, Princess Xianxia had no intention of listening to his explanation. Instead, she waved her hand impatiently. All right, as long as Yang Jima didn't do anything wrong, then don't create such a scene in the future. Don't think that just because royal brother gave you power, you can really do whatever you want. Let me tell you, Others might be afraid of you, but this princess isn't. If you anger this princess, we'll see who's the one who loses out in front of royal brother." After Princess Xiangda's words, Tang Tong felt the world spin. It seemed that the third princess was here to support Yang Qindong. Fortunately, she didn't give the order to search the manor. Otherwise, she really didn't know how to clean up this mess. Others might not be able to comment on the matters of the eunuch group, but as a member of the royal family, Princess Xiangda could. Not only was she on good terms with the queen of the imperial harem, Empress Qian, she was also the emperor's biological sister. She was greatly appreciated by the emperor. This could be seen from the grand birthday banquet that was held a while ago. Tang Tong broke out in cold sweat, his lips trembling. He knew that if he didn't clarify today's matter, there would be consequences later on. Thus, he didn't care so much and lowered his head. "Long live Princess. This lowly one is here on the orders of Supervisor Qian Sengbao to investigate this matter." "What's there to investigate? Don't think that this princess doesn't know. It's just beating up a Walla envoy. But you didn't investigate clearly who provoked them first before arresting people? Also, the one who beat him up was just an ordinary servant of the Yang family. You even bothered the Eastern commander over such a small matter. If that's the case, then if someone from the embroidered uniform guards made a mistake, shouldn't they also ask the Jianghu directly in charge of you for an explanation?" Princess Xiangda's coquettish voice resounded throughout the entire side hall. Her words left Tang Tong speechless. He originally thought that the third princess just happened to be there at the right time. But with these words, who wouldn't understand that she had clearly come prepared? She was even here specifically to solve the problem for Yang Qindong. At this moment, Tang Tong finally understood that with the third princess backing Yang Qindong, he wasn't someone he could mess with in the future. Yes, long live princess is right. I will go back and report this to eunuch Qian." Tang Tong nodded his head as he spoke. From the looks of it, he looked exactly like a pug. Tang Tong left, but he didn't forget to take the chest of silver that Yang Qindong had prepared with him. From this point of view, he had accepted the goodwill. He had already promised that if he didn't take the silver this time, it would mean that he would have to draw a line with the Eastern commander in the future. Princess Xiangda came and reprimanded Tang Tong, showing her rude and unreasonable side. As the outside world said, she was incomparably coquettish. However, when everyone in the side hall was reprimanded by her, she indeed looked at Yang Qindong with a smile like a flower. It was as if she was staring at an extremely exquisite ancient artifact. This gaze made sixth young Master Yang feel as if he had become a rare animal in the zoo. It was a very bad feeling. The atmosphere was a little awkward. Yang Qindong was the first to speak, cupping his fists in a grateful manner. "Thank you for speaking up for me, Princess. Qindong really has nothing to repay you with." "Sigh, how can there be nothing to repay you with? You are so capable, you must have a lot of fun things. Just take out 2 of them and let this princess see them." Princess Xiangda spoke casually, but in Yang Qindong's ears, he was extremely wary. He had never underestimated anyone, even if the girl in front of him was only 14 years old. She had grown up in the Imperial family since she was young, so she had matured earlier than others. After getting used to too many dirty things, it was impossible for her to not be mature. Usually, every word of this kind of person had a deep meaning. Everything depended on how the person who heard it interpreted it. If you ignored these words, you might unknowingly suffer a great loss. Not knowing whether this was a test or not, Yang Qindong pondered for a moment before raising his head and saying with a smile, "Princess, you must be joking. Whatever Qindong has, the Imperial family has as well. Even the world belongs to the great Ming dynasty. If there is anything here that Princess likes, you can take it away." "Is that true?" Sensing Yang Qindong's cautious and guarded manner, Princess Xiangda smiled. Not to mention, she had inherited the Zhu family's bloodline. Regardless of her temper, she was beautiful and charming. Under this smile, there were many things to admire. "Yes." Yang Qindong's gaze tightened. Then, he felt that it wasn't very friendly to look directly at the princess, so he looked away and agreed. "Haha, very good. Since that's the case, then this princess won't stand on ceremony." Princess Xiangda giggled. Then, her gaze began to size up the side hall. However, it was only for a moment before it finally landed on Yang Qindong and the jade pendant on his waist. Chapter 129. Yang Chendong was also sizing up Princess Xianxia. When he saw her gaze fall on the jade pendant he carried with him, his heart tightened. This was a waist pendant with the words peace engraved on it. It wasn't very valuable, but it was given to him by his father when he was 1 year old. It had an extraordinary meaning. Princess, this was given to me by my father. This. What? Dong Shuai just said that everything here belongs to the Zhu family and that we can take it as we wish. Are you going back on your words now? Princess Xianxia said sternly. Her face, which was originally pleasant to look at, changed in an instant, giving people a lot of pressure. This pressure obviously couldn't scare Yang Chendong, but it reminded him of her identity. Indeed, they were all from the Zhu family. None of them were easy to get along with. They changed their faces faster than flipping a book. Not wanting to be a busybody, he immediately took off his waist pendant and handed it over with both hands. Since the princess likes it, you can have it. Haha, that's more like it. As if she really liked this waist pendant, Princess Xianxia stretched out her jade-like hands to receive it. Then, she regained the innocent expression of a girl. All right, this princess has helped you solve your problem. Asking for a waist pendant from you isn't considered bullying me. Ha ha ha, let's go. Princess Xianxia left just like that, not staying for long. She probably knew that with her current status, staying too long in the Yang family village would easily attract criticism. Although she wasn't afraid of public opinion, it was better to avoid as much trouble as possible. The princess left, leaving Yang Chendong alone in the side hall, deep in thought. The third princess's sudden appearance and quick departure made him a little uncertain. If he had to pinpoint her intentions, it would be that she had only taken a waist pendant. He didn't believe that a spoiled princess would care so much about an ordinary waist pendant. Even when Xiao Yin and Lady Shui appeared in the side hall, hand in hand, Yang Chendong still couldn't figure out what was going on. On the other hand, the two women seemed to be aware of his predicament. Because Xiao Yin had been with Yang Chendong for a long time, she was the most courageous. She bluntly said, "Young master, I'm afraid the princess has fallen for you." What? Hearing this, Yang Chendong was shocked. It wasn't that he hadn't thought about it, but that he didn't think it existed at all. Although information was not so developed at that time, the matter of him falling in love with Hu Yan, the daughter of the Hu clan, would not be a secret in front of the emperor. Since the emperor knew about this matter, it was impossible for him to marry the princess to him. One had to know that according to the customs of that time, when a princess married a man of lower status, her status was even higher than that of a concubine. Not only that, as the emperor's son-in-law, he could only have this one woman in his life. Even the servant girl to warm the bed had to be chosen from the princess's own dowry. At that time, this was a tyrannical treaty for men. However, if one wanted to marry the princess, one had to pay a price in order to obtain benefits. Speaking of which, this was very fair. However, this kind of fairness might be useful for a destitute scholar with no power or influence. But whether it was power or money, what did Yang Chendong lack? How could he possibly marry only the princess and restrict his own freedom? The emperor should be aware of this. In addition, for the sake of Hu Ming and Hu Zhongning, he probably wouldn't have this idea. Thus, he took the initiative to omit it. Now that the two women had mentioned it, he carefully recalled Princess Xianxia's attitude towards him. Only then did he realize. Princess Xianxia's attitude did change a lot, but that was just her nature. The spoiled her would still act coquettishly in front of Zhu Qizhen and ask for benefits. In front of others, she was even more unscrupulous. As for the waist ornament, it was just a token of love. Thinking of this, Yang Chendong's expression changed again and again. He sucked in a breath of cold air and said, "This can't be done. Young master, since this can't be done, we have to think of a way." Xiao Yin and Lady Shui both stepped forward, looking concerned. They couldn't not be concerned. If the young master really married the princess, what would they do? If the princess was unreasonable and didn't allow them to stay in the Yang family, they could only leave. At that time, they wouldn't even have a place to cry. For their own rights they had to do something. Yes, the young master will think of a way. However, we have to do something right now. Yang Chendong's first thought was to immediately send the betrothal gifts to the Hu family. Then, he prepared to ask for the name. Although this situation was complicated, the process that had to be walked through was not something that could be omitted. But as soon as the thought appeared, Yang Chendong rejected it. Not for any other reason, but because this year was a particularly important year. Before the changes in the Tumu castle happened, he couldn't do anything big. Once he provoked someone and caused unnecessary trouble, it would be bad if it led to changes. Fortunately, Princess Xianxia was still young. Moreover, she was only testing the waters today. Even if she wanted to ask the emperor to grant her marriage, she still needed an opportunity. Now that he was resting at home in the name of being sick, it probably wasn't the best time to grant her marriage. Of course, the reason why Yang Chendong was so confident about this was because of Wang Zhan. He and Wang Zhan were in a cooperative relationship. They had agreed to pay him a large sum of money next year. Before the money was in his hands, he definitely didn't want to become the emperor's son-in-law and establish a connection with the imperial family. If Zhu Qizhen had such a thought, Wang Zhan would do everything possible to stop him. This was equivalent to buying time and opportunities for himself. As for after the big event, no matter what the situation was, at least Yang Chendong wouldn't be as passive as he was now. When the time came, he could find an opportunity to act first and report later. At that time, even if the emperor knew, he couldn't let Princess Chengde marry a married man and share a man with others. With a plan in mind, Yang Chendong regained his confidence. Okay, you don't need to tidy up here. Call Tiger's main inn. I have something to ask him. Seeing that Yang Chendong seemed to be thinking about something, Qiao Yin and Lady Shui looked at each other and left. They knew that all their hopes could only be placed on the young master. They also believed that the young master would be able to solve the problem. This came from a kind of trust. At the same time, it also showed that women in ancient times were not independent. Tang Tong went back and brought back the news that Yang Si was likely to escape to Jianghu Prefecture. She also brought back Princess Xiangde's attitude. Seeing that Tang Tong came back empty-handed, Chen Sengbao's face was cold and he was even prepared to hold her accountable. But when he heard that even Princess Xiangde came out and said those words, he knew that it was unwise to make an issue out of Yang Chendong being beaten up by Yang Si. Since there were no benefits, he didn't want to be involved in it. He immediately arranged for a little eunuch to pass a message to the magazine king, saying that the criminal was on the run and was being arrested. He then threw the matter aside. The magazine king was originally angry because of the incident with the guard captain Tuj. When the eunuch passed the message, he was even angrier. But soon his attention was diverted. It was not for any other reason, but because the Wallace spy in the capital of the Great Ming Dynasty had contacted the buyer who could buy high-yield potatoes. Compared to a guard captain being beaten up, high-yield potatoes were more important to the fate of the Walla. The magazine king put all his attention on the potato matter, and even arranged for his most trusted subordinate, Tuj, to handle this matter. In his words, if this matter was done well, it would be a great merit. When the time came, he would also have a merit in front of his brother, Yes Hen. At that time, whether he would be promoted or rewarded, it wouldn't be a problem. Now that there was something to do, Tuj temporarily put aside the grudges in his hands. He brought 4 skilled subordinates and a spy to guide the group of 6 to meet with a potato seller and make a deal. Perhaps in order to gain the trust of the seller first provided 2 full bags of potato seeds. When these things were sent to the relay station, the magazine king personally checked them. After confirming that there were no mistakes, the meeting was arranged. The seller seemed to be a very careful person. He arranged for the meeting to be in a small courtyard in a remote alley. Because of the location, very few people from the warden's office paid attention to this place. On the surface, there seemed to be no problem with the safety. However, this was still a transaction in the capital of the Great Ming Dynasty. If something went wrong and the Ming Dynasty took notice of their plot, it would be a big problem. Tua Gu was in favor of trading in such a remote location. But for safety, he still made 2 preparations. First, he didn't have much money on him. This way, even if the other party wanted to do something, without enough benefits, they wouldn't easily make a move. Second, he assigned his 4 subordinates to the surroundings of the alley. If there was any trouble, the 4 of them would be able to call out to each other from a distance. He didn't believe that there was someone who could silently deal with his 4 subordinates. As long as one of them noticed that something was wrong, they could shout and attract the attention of others. After arranging everything, Tuj brought the spy to the small alley. After observing for a while and confirming that there weren't any accidents, they entered the empty courtyard. Tuj was confident that he had arranged everything perfectly. However, he didn't know that there was something called a sniper rifle. He also didn't know that this thing could be installed with a silencer that he had never heard of before. This silencer could guarantee that it could take a person's life from 1,000 meters away as easily as taking something out of a pocket. Just as Tuagur was about to enter the small courtyard, Dao Xiao and the other 10 members of the second guard squad had already arrived. They were carefully inspecting the guns and equipment. Chapter 130. The so-called seller was actually someone from the security bureau in disguise. Their purpose was to frame the Walla's envoy. Offense was the best defense. If you don't want others to keep an eye on you, an excellent way is to make the opponent unable to pay attention to you. If you're already in trouble, how would you have time to keep an eye on others? This was the task Yang Chendong arranged for Tiger's Mane. After receiving the task, he passed it to Yang San and asked him to arrange the details. As a secret organization, Yang San and his men were much more professional than Walla's spies. This was not only because they were better trained, but also because they were rich and well-equipped. With the advantage in all aspects, it was only natural that Tile's spies had always been under the control of the Security Bureau. To lure them out and give them something that could move them was not difficult at all. On the contrary, it was very smooth. What was even more unexpected was the appearance of Tuagua. This person had once slandered the 6th young master in front of the Yang family manor's gate. Everyone had long wanted to kill this person to vent their anger. However, considering the other party's identity, they did not make a move. This time, he took the initiative to come to them. How could they let him go? Not long after Tuaguer and the Walla spy entered the small courtyard, Yang San appeared with another subordinate of the Security Bureau. There was also a carriage with many bags on it. It was impossible to see the appearance of the bags in the dark. However, considering the items to be traded, it was obvious what was in the bags. Under the attention of the 4 Walla's guards, Yang San walked into the small courtyard and saw Tuaguer, who had arrived first. "You have a lot of potatoes in your hands?" Seeing the person who came at the agreed time and saw that the other party came in a carriage, Tuaguer was satisfied but still asked cautiously. "Yes." Yang San's face was indifferent, like an emotionless humanoid machine. Since the person in front of him dared to look down on the 6th young master, it would not be an exaggeration to cut him into pieces. However, considering that Dao Xiao and the others still needed some time to complete their task, he forcefully suppressed the thought of attacking and continued to deal with Tuaguer. Yang San's attitude was so cold that Tuaguer felt a trace of displeasure from the bottom of his heart. However, considering that he was not here to make friends but to make a deal, he suppressed his dissatisfaction and asked again, "Who are you? Why were there so many potato seeds? As far as I know, this thing hasn't been popularized in the Ming dynasty yet. The seeds of this thing should be very precious." "Are you an officer?" Yang San answered Tuj's question unhurriedly. "No." Tugger shook his head. He didn't understand why the other party would ask such a question. Instead, it was the Valle spy who came with him who shook his head bitterly when he heard this. This general's bodyguard captain didn't know anything about the secret battlefront at all. How could he ask about the other party's background? It was impossible for the other party to tell him. As expected, Yang San used a gaze filled with disdain to look at Tuaguer and said, "Since you aren't an official, why are you asking me these questions? You really are an idiot." Tuaguer suddenly realized that he had said something wrong. However, the other party directly called him an idiot and angered him. He glared and said with a fierce expression, "You dare to scold me?" Just as Tuaguer was about to flip out, the Security Bureau agent who had been tidying up the carriage walked into the small courtyard. According to the previous agreement, once this person entered the courtyard, it meant that the Walla agents guarding outside had all been eliminated. A strange smile flashed across Yang San's face. "So what if I scold you? I still want to kill you." After saying this, a small crossbow appeared in Yang San's hand. At this moment, he was aiming it at the angry Tuaguer who was about to draw his sword. "Let's talk nicely. Let's talk nicely." Seeing Yang San take out a weapon, the Walla agent felt that the atmosphere wasn't right. He immediately tried to ease the atmosphere with a smile. How could Yang San, who already had the intention to kill, stop his killing intent because of these words? A cold smile flashed across his face. "Let's talk nicely? However, it's too late to say anything now. From the moment you entered this small courtyard, You were already destined to be dead. At the same time as his voice fell, his right index finger moved and pulled the trigger on the crossbow. Under the force of the spring mechanism, an arrow flew through the air and shot into Tua Guer's chest. At the same time, outside the small courtyard, four hidden snipers simultaneously fired their bullets into the head of Tua Guer's subordinate, who was completely unaware of the impending death. Among them, 3 bullets hit the middle of his eyebrows, while one missed and only hit the forehead. However, the powerful lethality still took his life in the first instant. The pitiful Tua Gur still maintained his posture of drawing his sword. He had an overbearing appearance as if he wanted to take the lead. He didn't know that the people he had arranged outside had all been wiped out. Furthermore, when he thought about how the other party attacked without the slightest hesitation. How was this a trade? It was clear that they were here to kill him. When Yang San made his move, his subordinates also took out the same crossbow and aimed it at the Walla spy. If you want to live, don't shout. Otherwise you will end up like him. The Walla spy, who had been scared silly by the scene in front of him, was already stunned. In the end, his mission was just to gather information. He was also trained on how to hide himself. His skills were only average. Now that even Tua Gur, who was extremely good at fighting, was killed without being able to fight back, what else could he do? In order to save his life, the spy stood there obediently and allowed the people from the security bureau to tie him up tightly. Even his mouth was stuffed tightly. There was another sound of footsteps outside the courtyard. Dao Xiao led the second team to clean up the 4 Walla guards who were hiding in the dark and carried their bodies inside. Let's get to work. Create a scene and bring him back alive. He must know a lot of Walla's secrets. A sinister smile flashed across Yang San's face. Perhaps it was because of his work, but he had become much more sinister. Even in the security bureau, few people dared to interact with him too much. They seemed to be afraid of the actual leader of the security bureau. Half an hour later, a big fire suddenly appeared outside the courtyard. The fire attracted the soldiers of the 5 cities' warden's office. When they put out the fire with all their might, they saw the scene in the courtyard clearly. A few men wearing Walla Guards uniforms were lying dead on the ground. In front of them, there were many scattered potatoes. This matter involved the Walla Guards. The 5 cities' warden's office quickly reported this matter. Not long after, the Eastern Faction Warden's office and the embroidered uniform guards men arrived one after another. The leader was the Jianghu official, Tang Tong. After he recognized Tua Guer's identity at a glance, his eyes flashed with anger. Another half an hour later, the magazine king, who was still waiting for news at the relay station, looked outside uneasily. Suddenly, the door of the courtyard he was resting in was pushed open from the outside. Then, a group of embroidered uniform guard rushed in with torches. Not good. Instinctively, the magazine king turned around and took the scimitar that was hanging on the wall. When he turned around, Tang Tong and a few other embroidered uniform guardsmen had already rushed into the room. Emissary, are you still going to resist? Looking at the magazine king's current appearance, Tang Tong sneered. What are you doing? Since you know that I am an emissary, why are you treating me like this? Aren't you afraid that the Ming dynasty will fall out with the Walla? The magazine king relied on his identity as an emissary to threaten them. I don't know about the matter between the Ming dynasty and the Walla, but now there is evidence that your guard captain has been buying prohibited potatoes everywhere. Now that he has been caught red-handed, I'll have to trouble the emissary to come with us and explain clearly. Tang Tong's eyes were full of threat. If the magazine king dared to resist, he would take action. A wise man knows better than to fight when the odds are against him. Although he knew that Tua Gur had messed up the matter, the magazine king still had some confidence when he thought about how he was the emissary of the Walla. Okay, I'll come with you and see what you have to say. The magazine king put away his scimitar, snorted coldly, and strode in front of Tang Tong. Tua Gur was killed and the magazine king was arrested. This was Yang Qindong's revenge and also successfully diverted the attention of the magazine king. Now that the magazine king couldn't even protect himself, how could he have the time to pay attention to Yang Qindong? Regrettably, the periodical king was, after all, the emissary of Tile. Especially after he found out about Tugger's death, he pushed all the blame onto the dead and complained about the injustice he had suffered. Without direct evidence, naturally, no one could do anything to the magazine king. However, this matter directly caused the court to be disgusted with the Walla. In particular, the Minister of Revenue, Wang Zhua, threw out the problem of the large number of people in the Walla's diplomatic group. When the potato had just appeared, Wang Zhua had suggested to the emperor that such a good thing should not be allowed to spread. Otherwise, when those foreign countries had enough food, they would raise their soldiers and horses. From there, they would have the ability to cause trouble for the Ming dynasty. This time, the Walla actually wanted to take the potatoes back, which could be considered as touching his reverse scale. In the court, he said that according to the rules of the court, the number of people in the diplomatic group should be limited to 50 people. However, this time, the Walla actually sent a group of 3,000 people. Just the food and drink alone cost a lot of money every day. It was really like a stone that stirred up 1,000 ripples. When the other officials heard about this, they all had a shocked expression. Zhu Qizhen, who was sitting high on the dragon throne, had a blank expression on his face at first, then it turned into anger. He looked at Wang Zhan, who was standing beside him, and asked, "Teacher, is this really true?" Chapter 131. Wang Zhan was one of the first to know about this, but considering the benefits he received from the Walla before, he wanted to minimize the problem and let them leave. But now that it was exposed in the Imperial court, some words had to be said. Replying to the emperor, the actual number is only around 2,500 people. 3,000 is a false number. Just as Wang Zhan had said, this time, Vala had indeed sent out 2,500 tributary envoys. In order to receive more rewards, they had falsely reported 3,000 people. It was normal for the Walla to falsely claim rewards. Because Wang Zhan colluded with the Walla and accepted bribes from Yes Hen, he pretended not to know. But this time, the emperor took the initiative to ask, and in front of the civil and military officials, he could not hide anything. Good. Are they here to pay tribute or to ask for something? After hearing Wang Zhan's answer, Zhu Qizhen's face became very ugly, and he announced in the imperial court, "Teacher, since you have received the previous diplomatic groups, this time I will leave it to you to solve. I don't care what method you use, but in short, it is not so easy to take advantage of me." Seeing Zhu Qizhen angry, Wang Zhan immediately said, "Please rest assured, Emperor, this subject knows what to do." After the court was adjourned, Wang Zhan did not treat the king of the periodical in the same amiable manner as before. Instead, he ordered the Ministry of Rights to give out rewards according to the number of people who were present. He also rashly reduced the price of the Valago horses by 4/5, paying Valeso only 1/5 of what he had asked for. This caused the periodical king's wish not to be fulfilled, and he angrily returned. Not only that, when the large diplomatic group returned, they were strictly inspected, and all the things they brought were searched. Rummaging through the books on the grounds of preventing illegal items made the magazine king lose face. After the angry periodical king returned to the Walla, he reported to Yes Hen with exaggerated details. When Yes Hen heard this, he was furious and immediately gathered the army, using the Ming dynasty's reduction of rewards as an excuse to split the army into 4 and attack the Ming dynasty, personally leading a large army to attack Datong. They were already prepared to attack the Ming dynasty, and this time, they had a suitable excuse. For a time, the border area was filled with the flames of war, and alarms were constantly sounding. Walla's cavalry was ferocious, and they quickly advanced to the south. The Ming dynasty soldiers guarding the northwest were defeated several times, and they hurriedly requested reinforcements from the capital. Walla's betrayal and the start of the war, once the news reached the capital, it caused a huge commotion. For a moment, they were all guessing which general the emperor would send as reinforcements to conquer Walla. While everyone was guessing, one person's heart beat wildly. He thought that his chance to become famous in the world had come. This person was the head eunuch of the imperial palace, the head eunuch of the ceremony directorate, Wang Zhan. Even though Wang Zhan, who could be said to be able to cover the sky with one hand, could be said to have absolute power at that time. Although some people had no choice but to rely on him because of his power, he was still a eunuch in the end. Other than his trusted aides, no one knew how to secretly curse him. If Wang Zhan were to fall from power one day, the first to attack him would be those who relied on him. Furthermore, Wang Zhan might not always be able to cover the sky with one hand, because his power came from Emperor Zhu Qizhen. As long as Zhu Qizhen no longer trusted him and was suspicious of him, he only needed to casually say a few words to make Wang Zhan lose the entire game. No matter how much power he had, he could not jump out of Zhu Qizhen's 5 fingers. This was what Wang Zhan was worried about. If he wanted to become an evergreen tree, he had to truly grasp the Ming dynasty's military power and reach the peak of power. To achieve this, it was far from enough to arrange a few trusted aides. Only by leading the great Ming dynasty's army to victory could he truly establish his prestige in the army. For this reason, he decided to urge Zhu Qizhan to personally lead the northern expedition to Walla. If he succeeded, as the leader, he would naturally have great merits. At that time, he would have many opportunities to touch the military power. Once this desire appeared in his heart, he had a feeling that he could not retreat. His whole body felt as if it was on fire, making him unable to sit still for a moment. Where is His Majesty now? Wang Zhan's heart was in turmoil. He really wanted to ask Zhu Qizhan to go to war, so he asked a little eunuch beside him. Replying to eunuch Wang, "His Majesty is resting with the Empress." "Good, let's go see His Majesty." Wang Zhan stood up, tidied up his sleeves, and walked straight to the rear palace with firm steps. At this time, Zhu Qizhan was resting in Empress Qian's palace. His complexion was not very good. Vala's violation of the border was somewhat out of his expectations and caught him off guard. When he saw that more and more requests for help were coming in from the border, he decided to leave the Palace of Heavenly Purity and go to the Empress Palace to relax. As for how to deal with this matter and who to send, the important officials would probably come up with a plan. This was one of the benefits of being the emperor. If he ran into problems or problems he didn't want to deal with, he could just toss them to someone else. Empress Qian was extremely virtuous and virtuous. When she saw that Zhu Qizhan's mood wasn't too good, she had all the maids and eunuchs leave the palace. She was the only one accompanying the emperor to rest in his chambers. She even suggested that if the emperor was too bored, he should take a trip to the immortal abode to relax. Zhu Qizhan was somewhat moved by the emperor's suggestion. The immortal abode had been open for more than half a year now, and there was always an endless supply of delicious food and fun things to do inside. When he heard people talk about it in the past, he would always look forward to it. However, because he was the emperor, leaving the palace would cause too much of a ruckus. That was why he had always suppressed this thought. Now that the empress was so supportive of him, he was truly moved. Empress Qian was worried about Zhu Qizhan's health after seeing how distressed he was, so she made this suggestion. When she saw that the emperor was actually moved, she smiled sweetly. "If your majesty wishes to go, you can disguise yourself as a commoner. However, you must bring more people with you. Your safety is still very important." Yes, the empress is absolutely right. How about this? We will immediately call General Fan Zhong over and have him arrange for more people to protect us. Zhu Qizhan couldn't wait any longer. There was a trace of urgency in his voice. The emperor issued a decree, and General Fan Zhong quickly brought over 100 Huban soldiers to prepare for the emperor's departure. It was at this time that Wang Zhan arrived. He was dressed in official robes. Only the eunuchs who served the emperor were allowed to wear such clothing. As soon as Wang Zhan arrived, Zhu Qizhan happily said, "Teacher, immediately change into a set of casual clothes and accompany us to the immortal abode. Let's see what new delicacies they have." Originally, Wang Zhan had been thinking about how to broach the subject of his personal expedition with Zhu Qizhan. Now that the emperor wanted to go to the immortal abode, it was absolutely quiet, and there were even private rooms there. It was much more convenient to discuss matters. He immediately agreed. As he went to change his clothes, he also arranged for someone to notify the last-ranked eunuch, Mao Mu, and have him notify Yang Chendong as soon as possible so that he could make the necessary arrangements. Yang Village. Leng Feng from Crimson City had arrived. He was personally led by Xiao Feng, who was already a battalion commander. Bai Zhua, the captain of the Phantom Sniper Squad, had also arrived with them. There were a total of 20 members, 10 of them snipers and 10 of them observers. When Xiao Feng arrived, he was immediately called to the study to give a detailed report of the situation on Little Ryukyu Island. From Xiao Feng's words, Yang Chendong learned that the majority of Little Ryukyu Island was already under the control of the Yang clan. Only the central northern region had not been recovered. This was because the population was too small, and they needed time to digest it. Otherwise, they would have been able to take down the entire Ryukyu Island in one go. Currently, on Little Ryukyu Island, the number of local aboriginals and the commoners that Deng Maoqi had taken away during his uprising added up to about 400,000 people. Among them, There were only 4,000 people who had truly passed the various tests to become members of Lung Feng. There were 2,000 in the army and 2,000 in the navy, for a total of 40 companies. According to the statistics of 4 companies per battalion, there were 5 battalions in the navy and 5 battalions in the army. As for the auxiliary soldiers and the children's regiment, there were close to 20,000 people. Very good. There's no need to rush the matter of Lung Feng changing from a battalion to a regiment. After listening to Xiao Feng's account, Yang Qindong's face was filled with satisfaction. Tall buildings were built from the ground up. The foundation was often the most important. If the organization of the army was messed up at the beginning, it would take a lot of effort to correct it later on. Rather than spending a lot of effort to reorganize it later on, it was better to lay a good foundation from the beginning and take one step at a time. After asking about the development of the army, he asked about the progress of the factories. He even asked about Yu Qian and Shen Yu's situation. According to Xiao Feng, the development and construction of the various cities in the factory were being carried out in an orderly manner. Other than the ships that went to the west to search for rubber and the power plant that could not be started, the other factories had entered the planning stage of development. The various goods that they produced were already self-sufficient and could be considered for expansion. Yu Qian and Shen Yu's situation was also very stable. When they first arrived at Resin City, they were shocked by the technological development and everything that they saw. As they gained a deeper understanding, they showed great interest in these developments and even took the initiative to participate in some things. However, when Xiao Feng said, however, he was still carefully observing Yang Qindong's expression. If you have something to say, just say it. Yang Qindong smiled. He knew that as the system grew stronger, the gap between his relationship with the people under him would also grow bigger. However, he still wanted to hear more of the truth. He did not want to lie to his superiors. Yes. Xiao Feng quickly responded, then said, however, when they found out that all the changes were related to the 6th young master and had nothing to do with the Ming dynasty, they showed strong resistance. They put down the work at hand and stayed in the house that we arranged for them. Chapter 132. Yu Qian and Shen Yu were officials of the Great Ming dynasty. One was a self-proclaimed Xianxia, while the other was an imperial censor. They were both people with integrity. Yang Qindong had long thought that the other party would not accept the changes in Crimson City so easily, especially since it was not under the management of the Great Ming dynasty. There would be resistance and incomprehension, but these two people were people who valued the country more than the king. As long as they saw that the ones benefiting were the common people, their thoughts would eventually change. It was just a matter of how long it would take. Yang Qindong firmly believed that time could change a person. Oh, they've been staying in the room all this time? Yang Qindong's smile was written all over his face. He was not surprised by the two people's uncooperative attitude. Yes and no. At first, they stayed in the room, but the 6th young master also knew that even in the room, the facilities inside were completely different from the Ming dynasty. In addition, after their relatives were safely sent back, they began to appear on the streets again. At first, they did not speak much, but when I received the order to come to the capital, they had already made friends with many of the common people in the city. It could be seen that the smiles on their faces were getting more and more. This is a good phenomenon. When he heard this, Yang Qindong was already certain that these two people would definitely be used by him. The only difference was the length of time. Everything caused by little Liuli was developing steadily. This was where Yang Qindong's confidence came from. There was no need to talk about advancing. If there were any accidents, he would have a place to retreat. So what did he not dare to do? Next, he had to consider how to make a good Wallace offense. Should he let the Tumu fortress incident continue? Yang Qindong knew that the Ming dynasty's elites were all lost in the Tumu fortress incident. From then on, the Ming dynasty began to weaken. But even so, under the efforts of many people, it still persisted for a very long time. But in the end, the Ming dynasty was defeated in the end. It was defeated because of internal strife. If not for the fact that the power was too scattered, the aristocrats, scholars, and eunuchs were holding each other back, and sometimes they could not even carry out the emperor's orders, how could there be the possibility of the Manchurian Tatars entering the pass? And how could there be the scene of the magnificent China being bullied and humiliated 300 years later? Originally, he had been considering whether he should take action to change history. However, when he thought of the actions of the Ming dynasty's monarch and the tragic history in the future, He shook his head and completely gave up on this idea. Forget it, if there were no elites, then so be it. The deaths of a few people in exchange for a happy life for more people. Especially since China was able to stand at the top of the world, it was appropriate no matter how one looked at it. Young master, Eunuch Mao sent word that Eunuch Wang Zhen sent word that His Majesty is going to the immortal abode. He asked for you to make arrangements in advance. Tiger's Mane appeared in the study and reported the news he'd just received. All right, I understand. Yang Qindong's expression froze for a moment. Then, a sharp glint appeared in his eyes. It was about time. This Wang Zhen was going to make a move to dissuade Zhu Qizhen. Immortal abode. Yang Qindong's sudden arrival caused Mu Lily, who was on duty, to be extremely nervous. Yang Xi's matter had obviously been suppressed by Dong Shuai. Now, every time she returned to the Yang clan manor, she could see Yang Xi. The two of them were gradually warming up. They were just waiting for the right opportunity to get married. All of this was thanks to Yang Qindong. When she saw Dong Shuai enter the immortal abode, Mu Lily hurried over to greet him. She said respectfully, "Sixth young master, why have you come?" "I need to receive an important guest. How about this? Immediately prepare the best private room and arrange for some quick-witted and nimble attendants to serve him." Yang Qindong nodded at Mu Lily with a smile. Then, he turned to Tiger's Mane and gave him a light nod, indicating for him to check the surroundings. Regardless of whether or not the emperor would bring guards with him, if something really did happen, he would still be in a lot of trouble. Tiger's Mane led Mu Lily up to the third floor with a group of people. They entered the private room and carefully inspected it. After confirming that there were no problems, they went downstairs. What they saw was a young man dressed like a noble young master, escorted by a group of people, arriving at the immortal abode's entrance. "Young master, you've come." Yang Qindong smiled as he walked over to greet him. When he saw Zhu Qizhen, who was dressed like a noble young master, he didn't kneel. Zhu Qizhen was dressed casually. He obviously didn't want others to know his identity. He didn't feel the slightest bit of displeasure at Yang Qindong's refusal to kneel. On the contrary, he nodded happily. Wang Zhen, who was also dressed casually, asked in a low voice, "Sixth young master, has everything been arranged?" "It's been arranged. The best private room on the third floor. Please." Yang Qindong nodded lightly, indicating that everything was ready. He turned around and led the way up the stairs to the third floor. In order to protect the privacy of their guests, the immortal abode had even covered the two sides of the stairs with red cloth. This way, only the owner would know who the guests were, and no one else would know. This was exactly what Zhu Qizhen wanted, and he boldly made his way to the third floor. In the private room, Zhu Qizhen sat on the east side, while Wang Zhen carefully waited on him. Yang Qindong left after asking what the emperor wanted to eat and what songs and dances he wanted to perform on the first floor. With his current status, it wasn't appropriate for him to appear in this kind of setting. If he insisted on appearing, the difference in status would only make him feel awkward. Now that there was no one else in the private room, Wang Zhen took the opportunity to voice his opinion, urging Zhu Qizhen to personally lead the troops. "Your Majesty, you are young and promising, and your heroic bearing is flourishing. Today, the great Ming dynasty is prosperous, and the people live a prosperous life. All of this is inextricably linked to your wise leadership." Wang Zhen smiled as he praised Zhu Qizhen. Naturally, everyone was willing to listen to flattery, and Zhu Qizhen was no exception. Even though he heard nothing but flattery every day, it didn't stop him from continuing to listen. "Teacher, our country's stability is due to the efforts of my subjects, as well as your contributions." Zhu Qizhen drank the fine wine and ate the piping hot delicacies that had just been served. Through the transparent glass, he watched the lively singing and dancing on the first floor. He watched the singers wearing the miniskirts that Yang Qindong had suggested, singing and dancing. It was truly a joyous sight. Zhu Qizhen knew that the costumes of these dancers had received a lot of criticism when they first appeared. There were even some who sent him memorials about it, causing quite a stir. In the end, Wang Zhen took the initiative to resolve this issue. He insisted that this was all a commercial activity, and that it was to serve the public. It was a delicacy in the eyes of many. In fact, this kind of event had attracted countless so-called gentlemen to watch. Many of them cursed the spider lilies while enjoying the benefits. It really was the type of person who enjoyed pain and pleasure at the same time. Now that Zhu Qizhen was in such a good mood, Wang Zhan felt that coming to the immortal abode to discuss this matter was the correct decision. At the same time, he said what he wanted to say. Your Majesty, your ability to rule the world has already reached the peak. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that no one will be able to do it in the future, but at the very least, no one has done it before. However, in the end, you are still lacking by a little bit. Everyone says that true experts conquer the world on horseback, and rule the world from horseback. You still lack the ability to personally lead an imperial army and cut through all obstacles on the battlefield. If you can accomplish this, I can imagine that the title of the #1 sage monarch in history would belong to none other than your Majesty. Personally lead an imperial army? Zhu Qizhen had never thought about this before, so Wang Zhan's words piqued his interest. Zhu Qizhen was only 22 years old. He was young, energetic, and full of vigor. At the same time, he had the same impulsiveness and desire for success as other young people. Originally, he hadn't thought about personally leading an imperial army, and had even been worried about who to send to lead the troops. However, when he heard that he could personally lead the troops, it was as if a door had been opened in his mind. It was like a bright light had suddenly appeared in the darkness, illuminating the path ahead. Yes, you will personally lead an imperial army. Wang Zhan, who had been paying attention to Zhu Qizhen, noticed that the emperor didn't have the slightest bit of reluctance. On the contrary, he had an expression of eagerness. He immediately knew that there was hope, so he continued to advocate. Think about Han Dynasty's Emperor Gaozu, Liu Bang, who was the first emperor to lead an imperial army and unite the world. Liu Yu personally led many expeditions to the north, establishing the Liu Song. Tang Taizong, Li Shimin, personally led an expedition to Goguryeo. There was also Emperor Cheng who led 3 expeditions to Mongolia, forcing them to surrender. However, when they heard the name of Emperor Cheng, they trembled in fear. Right now, your Majesty is still young, and we have millions of mighty soldiers. Facing a small walla, we can easily win in a single battle. Moreover, the fame of our army will spread far and wide. Wherever we go, I'm afraid that the enemy will collapse without fighting. In the future, when people mention your Majesty's name, I'm sure that they will also tremble in fear, not daring to offend the Ming dynasty in the slightest. In this way, your Majesty will definitely be recorded in the history books. It is also very possible for your Majesty to become an eternal emperor. Under Wang Zhen's description, Zhu Qizhen seemed to have already seen himself leading a mighty army into battle. Wherever he went, the enemy would tremble in fear and surrender at the sight of the wind. Weapons and armor would be thrown all over the ground, and there would be countless deserters and surrenders. Good. As if he was under the influence of self-hypnosis, Zhu Qizhen let out a series of cheers, followed by a hearty laugh. The emperor was so happy that Wang Zhen's face also revealed a somewhat abnormal luster. The military power that he had longed for a long time seemed to be within his reach. After this battle, he would return to the court victorious. At that time, even if the emperor wanted to touch him, he wouldn't be completely powerless to fight back. He could still live for a few more decades. At that time, what position would he be in? What kind of glory and achievements would he enjoy? Chapter 133. 2 people, a man and a hermaphrodite, were laughing loudly in the private room, as if they had encountered something extremely happy. Their laughter seemed to shake the entire private room. Yang Chendong, who had been waiting outside, carefully paid attention to the movements in the room. When the laughter came out without restraint, he guessed a possibility. He felt that the matter had been settled, and it should be time for him to appear. He immediately waved his hand, and a waiter brought over a delicacy that had just been prepared. Taking this opportunity, he pushed the door open and entered. Yang Chendong's sudden entry did not affect the hearty laughter of the ruler and official. Wang Zhan even had the intention to show off to him. Chendong, quickly come and pay your respects to the wisest and greatest emperor in our history. The emperor is going to personally lead the troops to Walla. As he spoke, Wang Zhan gave Yang Chendong a look. Personally lead the troops. Yang Chendong appeared to be very surprised on the surface, but in his heart, he thought that it was indeed so. If one did not seek death, one would not die. Zhu Qizhen was jumping into the fire pit himself. As a bystander, He was afraid that he would not be able to stop him. Yang Qindong's surprised look was seen by Zhu Qizhen. Does Minister Yang have a different opinion? Yang Qindong, what do you mean? Wang Zhan had given countless looks just now because he was afraid that Yang Qindong would get in the way. At this moment, in order to prevent the other party from speaking rudely, he even directly called out the official's name. From this, it could be seen that if Yang Qindong said something wrong, he would dare to let the Hu Ben soldiers outside rush in and throw him into the Imperial prison. Feeling Wang Zhan's threat and the Emperor's suspicion, how could Yang Qindong not know what to say? Personally lead the troops. This is really too good. Since ancient times, a famous emperor must be proficient in both the pen and the sword. Looking at our Ming dynasty now, the sea is peaceful and peaceful. Your Majesty has already seen results in governing the country through the use of the pen. If you personally go on an expedition, it can really be said that no one has ever done it before. Yang Qindong's praise was even similar to what Wang Zhan had said just now. Immediately, the two people in the room were overjoyed. When Wang Zhan saw that Yang Qindong was so tactful, he was very happy. He smiled and said, as the saying goes, great minds think alike. In the past, I didn't believe it, but now, I have no choice but to believe it. That's right, Mr. and Minister Yang have the same opinion. It seems that this time, we must personally lead the troops to prove the might of our nation. Ha ha ha. Zhu Qizhen also laughed in agreement. Not only could he make a name for himself, but he could also go out and have fun. This was a good opportunity to gain both fame and fortune. No matter how he looked at it, it was a good opportunity. However, at this time, Zhu Qizhen didn't even think about the possibility of losing the war. Perhaps in his eyes, he had never regarded Walla as a great enemy. During the time of Emperor Cheng, the strength of the nation was not as strong as it was now. They were still defeated by the Mongol Empire. Now, after decades of development, they really didn't see the slightest possibility of losing the war. This attitude attracted the praise of the emperor and Wang Zhan. Yang Qindong also pretended to have a flushed face and laughed at the side. However, as he laughed, he suddenly knelt on the ground and said with a very determined attitude, Your Majesty, this subject has a request. I hope that Your Majesty will agree. What is it? Let's hear it. Zhu Qizhen was in a good mood at this time, so his attitude towards Yang Qindong was naturally very good. Even Wang Zhan, who was at the side, was prepared to help Yang Qindong. After all, the other party cooperated with him so much. Even if it was to return the favor, he still had to make a move when it was necessary. Under the attention of 4 people, Yang Qindong's heart was set. He knew that his request would definitely be approved. He immediately raised his head and cupped his hands and said, Your Majesty, although this subject has a low position and is idle, I still consider myself a part of the great Ming Empire. Since Your Majesty is going to personally lead the army, this subject requests to accompany you. I also want to admire Your Majesty's heroic actions and the scene of your victory. When you return in triumph, this subject will definitely record everything and arrange it into a dance song to let the whole world know of Your Majesty's greatness and wisdom. There were also different levels of flattery. When Yang Qindong said this, it immediately scratched Zhu Qizhen's itch. He thought that victory indeed needed someone to record it. Although historians would record it, it was only words on paper. How could it be more intuitive and moving than a dance song? Immediately, he was overjoyed and agreed, Good, good. Yang Shi's loyalty is commendable. We will allow him to play. Wang Zhan, who was at the side, was also very happy. Yang Qindong took the initiative to ask to accompany the emperor. Didn't this mean that he was also optimistic about this battle? As such, no words were more effective than action. At this time, he looked at Yang Qindong with an increasingly happy gaze. Thank you, Your Majesty. Yang Qindong hurriedly expressed his gratitude and then stood up with a happy expression. He had decided to personally lead the army. Zhu Qizhen couldn't wait for even a moment. It was as if victory was right in front of him, and if he was a step late, the merit would belong to someone else. He didn't watch the song and dance he ordered and didn't eat the delicious food he ordered. He hurriedly left the immortal residence with Wang Zhen. After the emperor left, Yang Qindong also called Mu Lily, who was on duty, to return to the Yang family manor. Everyone who had received the news was currently waiting in the main hall of the manor, waiting for the 6th young master to call for a meeting. Not everyone was present at the meeting. Yang Qindong first met with Qiao Yin, Madame Shui, Madame Xiang, Dong Hanxiang, as well as the two foremen of the immortal residence, Mu Lili and Cui Na. In the main hall, Yang Qindong was extremely solemn and serious. The 5 women were also affected by the atmosphere, and their expressions became much more serious. Even Madame Shui, who used to throw flirtatious glances at Yang Qindong in the past, retracted her seductive gaze at this time. Madame Xiang was very beautiful. She had an elegant temperament, and her figure was also very voluptuous. According to the previous book, she was different from Madame Shui, who looked like Su Qing. She looked more like a young Guan Jilin. With her big eyes and towering breasts, there were very few men who could control themselves after seeing her. However, Yang Qindong was one of those rare men. It wasn't that he wasn't moved, but rather that he hadn't been able to find the right opportunity. Madame Xiang's dance was beautiful, and her talent in this field was outstanding. There were many performances in the immortal residence that required her to rehearse, so there wasn't enough time. With Qiao Yin and Madame Shui, Yang Qindong didn't insist on it. When it came to women, what he liked was the feeling of success when the conditions were right, and not the feeling of doing something in a hurry. In his opinion, that kind of combination would deprive him of a sense of beauty. It wasn't something he liked. This time, he called the 5 women over. Yang Qindong didn't waste any time on pleasantries. He went straight to the point and mentioned that he was about to follow the emperor to the border. Upon hearing that there was going to be a war, and that the 6th young master was going to personally take part, the 5 women couldn't help but show a hint of concern. In contrast, Mu Lili and Cui Na were much more reserved, but Qiao Yin, Madame Shui, and Madame Xiang all had expressions of reluctance and concern. There were even tears in their eyes that seemed ready to pour down at any moment. Enough! Going to war with the emperor, the young master is a civil official, so he won't be in any danger. As for the rest of you, once I'm gone, I'm afraid that the capital will fall into chaos. You must not panic. If you encounter a situation where things can't be controlled, immediately retreat to the Yang clan manor. I will arrange for people to protect you here. Yang Qindong's face was brimming with confidence when it came to his own safety, but he truly couldn't be at ease when it came to these women. All of them were heavenly beauties. Once the capital fell into chaos, who knew if some of them would be tempted by lust and take risks? For the sake of their safety, Yang Qindong had intentionally left Dao Zhao's group of 10 and the Ghost Shadow Sniper Squad in the Yang clan manor. Yang Si, Yang Lu, and Yang San of the Security Bureau had been left in the capital, so there shouldn't be any problems. But he was still worried that these women wouldn't be willing to abandon the immortal abode in the face of danger, which was why he had called them to this meeting. He had only one goal in mind. In times of danger, everyone in the immortal abode had to retreat to the manor. As for whether or not the immortal abode would be plundered by others, he couldn't care less. It was impossible to take care of everything in the first place. Since he had intentionally warned them about this, he believed that the girls would not panic too much if something were to happen. Young master, didn't you say that there wouldn't be any danger? Why did you make such an arrangement? Qiao Yin had followed Yang Qindong for a long time, and she was the woman who understood him the best. She had been to Crimson City before, and she was well aware of just how powerful that place was. Even with such tyrannical strength, Yang Qindong had still made such an order. Qiao Yin couldn't help but think about it. There's always a what-if in everything. Aren't I just preparing for the worst? Huh. Yang Qindong winked at Qiao Yin, his eyes gleaming. Qiao Yin's mental defenses crumbled, and she didn't say anything else. He quickly made appropriate arrangements for the women. After they left, Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei, Yang Wu, 1st Battalion Commander Xiao Feng, 1st Squad Commander Qiu Vi, 2nd Squad Commander Dao Xiao, Ghost Shadow Sniper Squad Commander Bai Zhua, and the others stood in the main hall. None of them sat down. They all had solemn expressions as they waited for Yang Qindong to give them orders. Very good. You don't panic in the face of trouble. This is a necessary quality for a leader. This young master hopes that you can remain as calm as you are now. Yang Qindong's gaze swept over everyone. Soldiers are trained for 1,000 days to be used in a single moment. You've all been in hiding for so long. Now, it's time for you to show your prowess. Now, I order. Everyone had gone through strict military training and formation training. As soon as the command was given, everyone tensed up their bodies, put their feet together, and stood at attention. Satisfied with everyone's performance, Yang Chendong said, "I order." Chapter 134. Within the palace, they were also nervously making preparations. Compared to the order in the Yang village, this place was much more chaotic. Zhu Qizhen was afraid that a long delay would lead to trouble, and that the ministers would oppose him when they heard the news. Zhu Qizhen privately ordered Wang Zhen to make full preparations before the war, striving to set out as early as possible. He was already eager to go out and show off. Naturally, this was also what Wang Zhen wanted. Whether or not he could seize military power would depend on his performance this time. He called all his disciples and grand disciples over. More than half of the eunuchs began to move. They mobilized troops and issued orders. They were extremely busy. Wang Zhen, who did not know anything about military matters, did not have enough understanding of Walla's attacks. He thought that by letting Ying Zong personally lead the troops, he would be able to scare the Walla troops away. Hence, to win by luck, he decided to make Ying Zong personally lead the troops when the Ming dynasty was not fully prepared. He wanted Ying Zong to follow Song Zhenzong's example and leave a good name in history. Ying Zong usually listened to Wang Zhen. This time, when he heard Wang Zhen's words, he felt that this was a good chance for him to show off his skills. Hence, he did not discuss with the officials and made the decision. He also announced that they would set out in 2 days. The moment Ying Zong personally led the troops, all the officials were shocked. When the officials found out, they immediately used Minister of War Kuang Yi to say, "It is not good for the sixth master to go out." Minister of Personnel Wang Zhen led the officials to advise against it. Reports of the defeat at the Datong front lines continued to spread to the imperial capital. These military uniforms that annoyed people in the past were like soul-reaping messengers in Zhu Qizhen's eyes. Since he had already made his decision and was attracted by the results of the victory, Ying Zong totally trusted Wang Zhen and insisted on personally leading the troops. As for the advice of the officials, he did not care at all. Now that the emperor had given his imperial decree, after a series of useless remonstrations, the only thing that the officials could do was to be appointed by him. Since the emperor was personally leading the troops, the number of officials following him naturally could not be small. If not, wouldn't they become a joke? Regarding this point, Wang Zhen quickly made preparations. A total of 100 officials and civil servants were present. Similar to history, even the people following the emperor were the same. The only change was that Yu Qian, the left assistant minister of the Bureau of Military Personnel, was absent from the capital. Without this pillar of support at this crucial moment, there was a hint of uncertainty as to whether or not the defense of the capital would begin, how it would begin, and how it would end. In just a few days, all the soldiers in the capital had mobilized. 500,000 soldiers from the northern provinces had gathered in the capital, and under Zhu Qizhen's personal command, they were ready to leave the capital to reinforce Datong on the second day. There was going to be a big battle, and the emperor was going to personally lead the troops. Regarding this, the common people naturally raised both hands in agreement. Since the establishment of the Ming dynasty, the people of the Ming dynasty had never experienced defeat in a foreign war. As such, they were very confident in their own army. Compared to the common people who did not know what was going on, some important officials had a different view. For example, in the home of the Minister of Rights, Hu Xiao, he did not have a good opinion of the emperor going on an expedition. In the study of the Hu residence, Hu Xiao and his eldest son, Hu Zhongning, were analyzing the situation of the battle. On the table was the battle report from the front lines. On it was written as follows. East, Tuachuo Buhua and Wulianya attacked Liaodong. West, other generals attacked Guangzhou, Xianxia of Gansu. The center was the focus of the attack and was split into 2. One was led by Alishiuan and attacked Red City of the Xuanfu. The other was led by Yeshen and attacked Datong. Yeshen's attack on Datong was led by, his troops were very sharp. The Datong army lost, and the castle outside the Great Wall was destroyed. Datong's General Wu Hao died in Mao'er village. The Ming dynasty's constable commandant Jing Yuan and the other 3 generals each led 10,000 men to defend against the enemy. Father Walla's army came prepared, but our army was in a hurry to fight. In this situation, we should fight slowly. With the strength of the Ming dynasty, we can slowly win. I really don't understand why the emperor wants to personally lead the troops. Isn't this too risky? Although Hu Zhongning was part of the embroidered uniform guard, he had good talent in military affairs. When he analyzed the situation, he hit the nail on the head. That's right. Very satisfied with his son's insight, Hu Chong nodded approvingly. However, his expression quickly became very helpless as he said, Minister Kwang of the Ministry of War, Minister Wang of the Ministry of Appointments, and other important officials all tried to persuade him, but the emperor did not listen. What can we do? Just as Hu Chong showed a helpless expression, Hu Yen rushed in from outside the study. Once she entered the study before she could catch her breath, she said anxiously, Grandfather, father, did he go as well? Can we not let him go? Needless to say, everyone knew who she was referring to. Faced with this question, Hu Chong first nodded and then shook his head. Yang Shima is indeed on the list of people accompanying the emperor. However, I heard that he asked for it. Furthermore, the army is leaving tomorrow. Unless he asks for it himself and needs a good reason, no one can stop it. I'll go find him now. After Hu Yen heard this, her lips pressed together tightly and she turned to leave. Wait. Hu Zhongning suddenly called out to his daughter. Yen, you are still a girl after all. Not to mention that the Yang family has not given you a betrothal gift. Even if they did, it doesn't count until you are married. Why are you going now? Be good and stay at home. Father. Hearing that Hu Zhongning was stopping her from going, Hu Yan's face immediately became anxious. Although she was not married, her heart had long been tied to Yang Chendong. As if he knew what kind of personality his daughter had, after Hu Zhongning stopped her, he directly shouted outside the study, Is Lieutenant Sun Chuang here? Here. Sun Chuang, who was responsible for security outside the door, immediately responded. Watch the young Mississippi. Without my order, she is not allowed to leave the house. Hu Zhongning ordered loudly. When a man went to the battlefield, his head was tied to his belt. No one could guarantee that he would return safely. If there was a problem, his daughter would still have to marry. At this moment, he naturally had to keep his reputation intact. Hu Yan's matter was ultimately just a small episode. The next morning, on the 16th of July 1449 AD, Ingzong ordered his brother, Zhu Qiyu, to guard the capital. Zhu Qizhen and Wang Zhan gathered an army of 500,000 in a few days, randomly allocated some food and weapons, and hurriedly set off. Along with Ingzong and Wang Zhan were Duke Ingzhang Fu, Minister of War Kuang Yi, Minister of Revenue Wang Zhua, Cabinet Scholars Chao Nai, Zhang Yi, Crown Prince Yang Chendong, and more than 100 other civil and military officials. However, Ingzong did not allow them to participate in military and political affairs, leaving all military and political power to Wang Zhen alone. Due to the improper organization, all military and political affairs were arbitrarily decided by Wang Zhen. Duke Changhua Zhu Yong was a general, but in front of Wang Zhen, he had to kneel. Minister of Revenue Wang Zhua asked the emperor to return to the army, and Wang Zhen ordered him to kneel in the grass until the sky turned dark. The civil and military officials accompanying the expedition were not allowed to participate in military and political affairs, and the army was in chaos. Yang Chendong was also among the officials, and not only that, he even asked Wang Zhen for a position in the army. This was also a reward for Wang Zhen to thank Yang Chendong for taking the initiative to speak up for him in the immortal abode. It was precisely because of this that the sixth young master was able to arrange for his own people to serve by his side. The so-called own people naturally referred to Tiger Main, Beta Persei, Yang Wu, and Qiu Vi's first guard, as well as Xiao Feng's first company of cold-edge soldiers. As long as Yang Chendong didn't interfere, the outcome of this battle was obvious. Once they were surrounded by Walla's army, it would be very dangerous without sufficient strength to protect them. Yang Chendong had only just transferred the first company of cold-edge soldiers over, and it was also at this time that he began to bare his fangs. This was one of the benefits of joining the army. Although he didn't have any real authority, especially under Wang Zhen's leadership, he could still arrange for a few people to serve by his side. The chaos of the army also brought benefits to his arrangements. At the very least, no one cared or questioned him. Similarly, because the preparations for this expedition had been rushed and poorly organized, the army was in chaos not long after they set out. Before they even reached Datong, the army was already running low on food. People were dying one after another, and corpses covered half the road. It had to be said that because the army had been assembled too hastily, The gathering of 500,000 soldiers had been extremely chaotic from the start. Just how chaotic was it? The Minister of War, Kuang Yi, had fallen off his horse due to the crowd. The Minister of War was the equivalent of the current Minister of Defense. Even he had fallen into chaos, so one could only imagine how poorly organized and disciplined the army was. How could such an army possibly win a battle? They didn't care about the situation of the enemy, nor did they discuss battle plans. They didn't even arrange for logistical support, treating this expedition like a child's game. Wang Zhan was in charge of all military affairs, and the accompanying civil and military officials didn't participate. This was simply an amateur commanding an expert. Yang Qindong didn't say anything about Wang Zhan's random orders. He knew that even if he wanted to say something, the other party probably wouldn't listen. Since that was the case, all they could do was wait and see what would happen, as well as do what they could. For example, the Minister of Revenue, Wang Zhua, wasn't young anymore. Seeing him kneel in the grass, Wang Zhua had personally delivered a thick praying mat to him. The commander of the embroidered uniform guard, Ji Guang, had seen everything clearly and reported this matter to Wang Zhan. Wang Zhan was very busy and wanted to get involved in everything, big or small, so that everyone could do as he wished. When he heard the report that it was Yang Qindong's doing, he only frowned and waved his hand. Let him go. Record everything about him and we'll talk about it later. Of course, he wasn't letting him go out of the kindness of his heart. Wang Zhan wanted to record everything and interrogate Yang Qindong to see if he could extort more silver. You're tuning in to the Wisdom Diary YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.